Welcome back to Post-Op Reflections. I'm Neil. This is Will, my partner. And today we got a really exciting guest, really genuinely kind person, someone who's courageous, who's willing to take chances, and somebody that I consider a friend. Assistant Chief Reuben Ramirez recently retired about a year ago from the Dallas Police Department, where he instituted a wellness unit when he was working with Chief Eddie Garcia at the time. And he also created a program called Checkpoints. And I'm going to let Reuben dive into what that's about. I'll also talk a little bit about his book, which is also called Checkpoints. And it's an absolute pleasure, my brother, to have you here to talk with us today.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for being here, Reuben. I appreciate you so much. I know you being assistant chief for the Dallas Police Department in 30 years of service is in a tremendous amount of experience, especially in the tougher situations, and serving those around you are going to be huge, especially for the audience that are going to be listening in. Your stories of turning tragedies into triumph is going to help so many people out there deal with the obstacles that they're trying to overcome right now. And I think it's going to be inspirational and motivational for those that are serving within the ranks at home and abroad, and for everybody in general. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Will.
So in the SEAL teams, every time we go on mission or operation, right when we come back with the gear still on, before we even put the batteries in the chargers, we'll just quickly go, okay, what went right, what went wrong? Whether the op went even perfect, we'll always just quick do a hot wash while everything's still hot, adrenaline's still rolling through. Some guys might get emotional, like, dude, why'd you go through there? You went down there by yourself. Should have waited up, paused for a second, whatever it was, right? And then once everybody cleans up, we usually days or whatnot later, or even from other elements, we'll debrief someone else's operations, if not our own, when everybody has their shit back together. Once shooter statements are written, and then we'll have a more professional, well thought out debrief of a mission or operation, the good, the bad, the ugly. Post-op reflections is what happens when we're on silent space in life till the end of our life. Is when you're reflecting of like, man, that was a hard one. Even the good ones, something haunts you. And that's what post-op reflections is. It's the reflections of all the things that we've done in the different missions or experiences we had. For normal people, it's in their life, raising their kids, a marriage that went wrong, what they could have did better as a parent, whatever it is. For us, it's, man, I almost could have saved that kid. Or maybe I shouldn't have pulled that trigger. Or maybe I hesitated. Or maybe you know what I mean? We start reflecting, and that's what eats at people. And then they start drinking, and they start doing these other things, and then the relationship starts sabotaging around them. Because of reflecting and not, in my mind, not putting it in the right spot and kind of owning it and being like, oh, I could have grew from this. I could have post-traumatic growth, or I could have learned a lesson and got better from it instead of falling back into it because of reflecting the wrong way and dwelling on it, which is creating depression and other things and whatnot. So that's how I kind of see post-op reflections, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. And I think it's powerful, man. I think that's really what we're missing, I think, very often, is that we all go through those post-op reflections, and it's what we do with it, or just kind of having a most validating, having somebody to be able to share that with, to be able to say, listen, at the very end of the day, like, I mean, this is just human. Like, this is the human experience, and we put ourselves in some extremely difficult positions for the sake of service, but that doesn't mean that we got to carry those, those I guess those injuries, alone, because the very likely that our brothers and sisters, they're all doing the same thing. And I think the more that we bring kind of truth to that we create this validation for it, and it allows us to do, it allows us to start that healing process. And I think we unfortunately wind up struggling often and trying to heal on our own. And I don't know that it lets us be the husbands and wives and that we want to be, or the mothers and fathers, and then that part starts to create a different difficulty. So, I mean, I love what you're saying, because it's all truth. I mean, it's a noble thing to serve, but we've got to bring the nobility to healing to the forefront too.
It's got to be consistent during your service, after your service, just all the way through. I think, when Dr. Carson and I were down there talking to Border Patrol agents before President Trump got elected and came in, we already knew that it was going to be a tough battle ahead, and that their workload and what they're going to end up doing is going to be harder than it's ever been. And I told them, when I was talking to them, just being honest, like, I know you all love your job, but when you're recruited and selected and trained up, and now you're on the front lines doing it, no one told you that it would suck.
Yeah.
and that it was going to be hard, and that, seeing kids and women crying and their souls out to you, and families getting taken, having to go, like, that's tough. Sometimes enforcing law is tough, and it's going to be tough on you, and you're going to have to regulate to some degree. And same thing across the board and everything that we do. Like, there's going to be times where it's just going to suck. And you're going to have to weather that storm and get through it and heal from that cut. Because if you don't heal from those cuts, you're going to get a death by 1,000 cuts. And if you don't stop bleeding from your cuts, you're going to bleed on all those you say you love around you. And you're going to wonder why your relationships are being torn up and broken up around you. And then you're going to go and suffer in silence and think you're going to start self-medicating, and you don't even realize it. You're starting to spiral, but you don't want to reach out for help, because that's our thing. Like, can't show weakness, no chinks in the armor. I gotta be Superman. I don't want to know about kryptonite. But this is going to hurt, and we're all humans, and we have a soul, and the soul, man, when it hurts, it hurts.
Yeah, I think that example you gave is so accurate, but I also think that we can carry that over to what our ICE officers, our immigration officers are going through right now. I mean, that, when you're, I can tell you, just having worked protests, over the last 10 years, that's a very emotional event, particularly when the protest is against you and during the whole kind of defund, movement. But when you're in the middle of those kind of political crosshairs, and you're kind of getting lumped in certain areas, and you're really almost forced to operate mission first and suppress the emotion, we have to recognize that those suppressed emotions are going to have to be addressed at some point. And I think similar to the Border Patrol example you gave, I think a lot of our immigration officers who are doing a good job are really getting lumped into groups of things that are going to create an emotional injury for them. And I'm not saying we pull off mission, we don't, but we have to acknowledge that is a difficult thing, and give them that space to be able to address it, so that they can continue to do mission and continue to do this really polarizing role that they're in.
My analogy, since we're in Fort Worth, would be like, we play football for TCU. We're one of the Horned Frogs, right? But every time we play at a home game, the whole stadium boos us.
Yeah.
But then they want us to win, but they're booing us the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening to the local law enforcement with the defund the police movement.
Yeah.
And you expect us to be at our top, performance in every single way, shape, or form. You hate us, but you need us, and you want us. And if someone you love is in danger, you're going to call us, but you're booing us. And that's exactly what's happening across the board. It doesn't make sense. It's irrational. It's over-emotionality, misplaced emotionality that becomes irrational. And you're going after our nation's protectors. And everybody knows, without our nation's protectors, your kids can't walk 2 blocks down any inner city street without getting mugged or robbed or assaulted. And yet you're booing them.
Yeah.
That's really what's happening right now. And it's just shocking, because it's just it's a bit of madness is what I've seen. So I won't talk about it, because I'm a political appointee for President Trump right now. But that federal building in Los Angeles in Alameda, my office is on the 4th floor there. So from the beginning of the protests, from the ICE protest, it started right there at the epicenter in Los Angeles. And we're just like looking down, like, and when they tagged up all up, they were breaking apart the concrete pillars, the parking pillars to protect the barricades, and throwing those chipped concretes at the federal police and the security there. That's where it all started. And we're like, dude, you guys, you're literally protecting illegals and criminals and nefarious actors and attacking the good people of our country right now. It makes no sense.
Yeah,
No sense.
you're so right. I don't know.
One thing, if I can, it goes back to what you were saying. Law enforcement, whether it's local, county, state, or federal, they know that that's a possibility to face that hate, even though people want you to do your job. But people still keep signing up and joining. People still keep going to work. And it goes back to what you said about the nobility of service. Whether we're talking about our first responders or our military heroes, there's nobility in that service. And I think most people would acknowledge that. But you said something, I don't think I've ever heard it put quite that way. You said we got to bring nobility to healing, I think is what you said. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, so I guess I'd start off by saying, that nobility of service, in my opinion, the reason we continue to sign up for these types of roles, despite some of the difficulties and really the stigmas and things that we hear so often today, is, I'll tell you, I think it is really almost our God-given design to serve people. Like, that's what we come to these noble professions for, because we know that there's something bigger in life. And so when we set out to do it, get into this noble profession, what we find is that whether it's in service or in, as a first responder, you are often in front of the carnage of that role more than anything else. So your opportunity to really protect and serve, while you're doing it on a bigger picture, you daily, what you are seeing is grief. You're seeing tragedy. You're seeing sadness. You're seeing just kind of disruptive behavior, and so you don't get that opportunity to feel the service that you're actually providing. And so I think because of the concentration of that disruptive behavior or that difficulty or that tragedy or that crisis, it starts to eventually take its toll on us, but it manifests differently. It manifests in kind of isolation or separation or feeling like, I've got to stay focused on this mission. And so I think the other things in life that really, really matter to us wind up taking a back burner. And I think that, mission, we can do it in deployments, but when you're doing it daily, consistently over, cumulatively over time, I think that's where we get into this danger zone. And that's the piece that I don't think has really been brought, is this nobility in healing, right? There's a nobility in carrying these scars. There's a nobility in this service. This is a byproduct of our service. And again, it's our God-given, it's our design. We're designed to help people. So by association, we're designed to help people this way. We are going to carry scars. We're going to carry difficulties. We're going to carry wounds. That's part of, not to sound cliche, but that's really the cost of freedom. What we give in order to provide that safety and that freedom is we give our anxiety. We give the possibility of creating depression. We give these difficulties in our families, in our relationships, in those parts of our lives that we love. But there's nobility in that. And as soon as heroes start to voice that, and we start to show that, hey, we are very similar here. We are carrying the same difficulties and carrying the same wounds. I think that we will start to show the nobility in that healing, and it'll cause others to come forward and really just acknowledge the kind of the things they've carried. And then I think we can start to heal. I think we can start to, because just like the calling and that service to this noble profession, there's a calling and a service to sharing our difficulties and our vulnerabilities. And my hope is that, as more and more leaders and heroes who have served come to acknowledge those things that they've carried, I think we're going to give a lot of our men and women the opportunity to heal.
Absolutely. You mentioned two things there, wounds and scars. And I think there's a distinct difference. And the problem is a lot of us are carrying wounds and we're self-medicating. We're trying to deal with those wounds. And a wound is an injury that's still festering. A wound is an injury that hasn't healed. Scars are something that stay with us through life, but they represent healing. It became a scar because you're able to heal that wound. And what do you think we need to do to try to push that nobility in healing, so all of us who are carrying wounds can actually find the healing? And it may scar up and it will be with us for the rest of our lives. Some things just don't go away, but there's hope in that healing.
Yeah, I think, not to oversimplify it, but I think it comes down to truth. I think we just have to be honest about the human experience of a servant-hearted man or woman. One of the absolute truths that I like to talk about is that if you are a servant-hearted man or woman and you come to these noble professions to serve, then by association, you will be more affected by the grief and the tragedy and sadness. You have to be. You can't be a servant-hearted man or woman, be willing to lay down your life to protect someone that you don't even know, and then not be affected by the grief and the tragedy and the sadness. Those two characteristics work incongruent. They have to. You will be affected just because you are designed to care. You're designed. You answered the calling, and so I think bringing that truth, that absolute truth to the forefront, I think is probably the first step. For whatever reason, and I would never, be critical of the people, the generations before us in these service professions, but because they did a really good job with what they had at the time, but they laid their tracks and it served them. but it's our turn to lay our tracks now. And our tracks are bringing truth to the reality that we carry wounds because we're servant-hearted. And so we can heal through them as well. But we've got to first bring light to that truth that's just the way we're designed. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually one of our greatest strengths. And I think when we do that, what we're going to see is that men and women are going to continue to come to this noble servant-hearted profession, but we're going to give them a better opportunity to heal than we did in the past.
I've always found that those who have the biggest hearts hurt the worst. And for a good man, you have to have a big heart. You have to care. And caring is just a symptom that you actually are mission focused. You want to do the right thing. You want to succeed, especially when it comes down to saving somebody or whatnot. But when tragedy strikes, that also means that you hurt the most because you have that big heart. And those that I think laugh the loudest have cried the worst because they've seen that, and it shows in how they live life and how they serve. You know, even throughout history, all the warriors that have gone out, including like the Spartans and everybody else, you know, when they go off to war, before they go, they put their name on a stick, you know, because they represented their family name. That was the pride, the honor, the dignified, the noble service that they're going out there into the battlefield with. And if they survived the war and the campaign, they would come back and they would put those two sticks back together. And that would start and signal practically and materially the healing process to fold back into society, to get back to building, farming, growing, doing those things, and leaving that war behind. But in the occupation of arms or service at home or abroad, it's nonstop. It's go home, get something to eat, try to get a workout in, sleep, get up, rinse and repeat, and you're back out again. The battlefield now is still within neighborhoods, within every city and whatnot. You don't get the relief. You might get one vacation a year and you can't even relax on that vacation. So there is no leave it behind, get back to good until the next time we have to go back out. It's now a full-time occupation with no let up. And that has significant wear and tear over time, I think, is what I see happening.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's what we're seeing. I mean, I think that's why we're, you know, despite this almost 3 to 5 year campaign of talking about mental health and wellness, you know, consistently, if not constantly, we are continuing to see the stigmas grow not in our favor. I mean, we're continuing to see the difficulties with everything from anxiety to depression to the suicide numbers, because there's a piece of this puzzle that we haven't properly addressed yet. I think we have absolutely addressed how to go out and protect and serve at the highest level. I mean, our men and women servicemen and first responders are the best trained in the world, and they're effective. They're good, but for some reason, the opposite end of that, the recovery piece, we haven't figured it out. We haven't really shown, you know, some measurable improvements there. And again, I think we've seen measurable improvements in the amount of resources that are available. I think we've seen measurable improvements in the amount that we talk about it. But there's a practical piece that's missing to it. There's an application that's missing. But I think we're on the verge of it. I really do, because what we have now is we have more people who have skins on the walls, who have been out there and really done this at an extremely high level, and they're talking about it now. And that I think that's a heck of a first start. But I know that there are more people out there like you, Chief, who have seen this, who have done this, who have experienced it, we're raising an eyebrow to. And when we get them and we get their influence and we collectively get together and really push this message about just being honest about the things we're carrying, the scars and those wounds, what we're going to find is that everyone else is carrying similar ones, and they're going to, through that vulnerability, they're going to be willing to shed a little bit of that armor in order to get towards that healing. And then I think we're really going to move the needle on this.
Well, one thing I've heard you say before, kind of addressing the training that we have, and I think what you said was, and this applies to the military too, really good at tactical situations, really good at doing our jobs, really good at dealing with, I think you said, bad guys and bullets.
Yeah.
And then something else you said was, you will rarely see us lose a fight. because we're really good at our jobs.
Yeah.
But the same is not true when it comes to those internal battles, those emotional battles that we deal with. You do think you're seeing a change, though. You're seeing that we're kind of making a corner maybe, but we obviously still have a long way to go because the stats are not supporting an improvement in a lot of areas.
Yeah, I think, when you look at the things that, we really address primarily in our fields is we are addressing tactics, operational planning, really the mission. And I think we do an incredible job at it. I think that's the reason why we usually win the battles we're in. I mean, I don't know that there's any statistic that you can find that will say otherwise. We generally win the fights we're involved in. And even more so, we recover from them pretty well. But what we really haven't addressed is the emotional scars, the emotional part of the job. And I think, like we were saying earlier, that there's an emotional component to this job just by virtue of being servant-hearted that is huge. And that's the piece that I don't think we have given a similar type of emphasis on. A type of emphasis to the degree that we do to the tactics and the operations and the planning. When we do on the front end, like I love what you said earlier, just, hey, we go into these missions and we're not really talking about, hey, this job that you're about to get in, like you used the Border Patrol example. Yeah. This is going to be hard. You're going to see some sad things. I think if we properly prompted in all of our professions, properly prompt them to the difficulty, how hard this is going to be to see these emotional things. And then just like in tactics or special ops, let's plan a strategy to recover from it. Let's plan a strategy of how we're going to process those. First of all, how we're going to recognize them and how we're going to process those things and how we're going to recover from those things. We do just as much on the emotional piece as we do on the tactical piece. Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of gain. I think we got wide open field in front of us after that.
Well, it goes back to something else I've heard you say before. So one of the things we do in the United States military is the best in the world at doing this is training our people to not let someone else kill them, right? Like we have officer safety training, stuff that we do to make sure when officers go out, they have the best chance of surviving whatever encounter they come across. But you said something recently, and it was, we are rarely told when we enter law enforcement that we are more likely to kill ourselves than have someone else kill us. And even though that statistics show that is more likely, we don't put the same amount of effort in preventing us from killing ourselves.
Yeah, and I think it's really unfortunate, because I think when an officer takes his own life, there are a lot of unknown variables, right? Like we don't know whether that officer was he struggling in his relationship, or was he or she struggling in their marriage, or with finances, or with alcoholism, and I think that's probably the thing that bothers me the most is that why aren't we figuring that out? Why do we have the luxury to just say, well, they committed suicide, but it could have been a number of different things. I mean, in a tactical situation, if someone takes one of our lives in a real life situation, or we are going to figure out what we did wrong. We're going to scrub that incident and we're going to make the corrections to make sure that nothing like that happens again, at least not from a training or a human error issue. But we don't put that much research or study in the after action of when we take our own lives. And I don't know how much on a tangent we want to go on this, but you can apply this to a number of different situations that we find officers involved in. When we see incidents like using there's everything from rudeness complaints to even excessive or force that looks to be excessive. There's a piece to this that we should be trying to study what the precursors to that might have been, as opposed to just looking at, well, they used aggressive forces outside of, or excessive forces outside of policy, and now there's a disciplinary issue. I get that component has to be there, and I'm okay with that accountability. But what about scrubbing that just a little bit deeper to figure out what were the contributions to that? And I'll give you this example that I'm going to continue to bang the drum on is, until we know what a police officer has responded to throughout the course of their career over the last months, quarters, years, or career, then we don't have the full picture of what they may be carrying. And that should be an absolute necessity that we start to really dive into how many suicide calls have we been to? How many homicide calls? How many fatality car crashes? How many CPR attempts? How many people have died in our arms? Because I'll tell you this, and I'll, not to call you out, Chief, but you can't tell me how many suicide calls you've been to in your career. You can't tell me how many homicides or fatality car crashes. And if you can't tell me, then there's a good chance that the men and women that you supervise and led can't tell me. And if we don't know the answer to that question, then we don't know the thresholds. We don't know when one suicide becomes too many. We don't know when one homicide call becomes the tipping point to where we go from being good to not being good. And those thresholds absolutely need to be known, and they need to be told because they're part of the story.
Every human being is shaped by their experiences, period. And we think in patterns, and that's how humans survive. And so you're absolutely right. Like all that stacks upon each other and just puts more weight on your shoulders. And any man or woman can carry only so much weight until they're at a breaking point. And if they don't bend, they break, right? But I wanted to also address a couple things, because you're right about training. In our recruitment and selection process, put all the ugly and bad stuff up front. Show them the case studies, like here's something awful that happens and can happen and expect it to happen if you do this. And put it all up front. No one does that. No one says, hey, don't drink, save your money, get ready to buy a house, and you're going to experience these things. Make sure you get therapy, work out at least 5 times a week, get it out. There's none of that. Everything's about being hard, stay mission focused, on purpose. One of the things that we're trying to do, which I think is the action part, is what we're all trying to get to, is what I recognized years ago. We all get caught up in the work, in the mission, because that's our purpose. And those of the cloth in religion, your pastors, preachers, and teachers, they take sabbaticals, and they literally call it a sabbatical. About midway in the war on terror, they started telling all the special operations forces and us in the SEALs, we're going to start doing decompression stops, is what we started calling it, where we need you to take a knee, we need you to decompress when you're coming back from the war zone. It was only 3 days, and then you're reintegrated back with your family. It didn't work right, but the idea was right. And so we need it, I think, in these types of occupation of high stress, high strain, high mission focus, life or death scenarios, make it necessary to have whatever you want to call it, this occupational sabbatical. That's not a vacation, because laying on the beach in Hawaii doesn't allow you to process, and do those things. There has to be some sort of structure to it to get back to good. Because if the people who are dealing in counseling, religious counseling and things like that, have to take a 2-week sabbatical because the weight of people talking about the divorces, talking about a loss of a family member becomes too much to bear for them, how much does it have to bear on police officers, firemen, first responders, and others who are seeing and experiencing the loss of life, seeing the last breath taking, seeing the mom and dad crying over the child who doesn't make it? They're experiencing it, not just hearing it. They're living it with the victims at the moment, but they don't take a sabbatical. And almost we have to change the culture where, like, if you take a knee, you decompress, you need a break, they're like, what's wrong with you? Let's just go to a bar and tell stories and have some drinks. Yeah. That's where our culture is right now. And we all know that it always takes about 3 things for things to go downhill towards a suicide or something worse. On-the-job trauma or life trauma that you don't recover from. There's no secondary traumatic healing from it. A bad relationship, someone you love that's falling out of love with you, and then you start inebriating yourself or doing other things. And those 3 things are the recipe for disaster for any good human, no matter what you do in life. And now I recommend to my friends, like, hey, listen, if you choose a partner in life and you're a warrior, try to find a healer, because you can't go home from the fight to chaos.
So true.
You have to have peace somewhere. And if you can't find peace in your home, don't build that home, because if it's just chaos there, you're never going to get a break, and it's just going to get worse and worse every which way. And the only break you're going to find is finding some sort of vice that's going to be worse for you, but you don't realize it. But you're going to find solace or try to seek solace in a vice and not an asset, not a good, not a plus, a negative. And you're wondering why things are going bad, because you can't find peace. You have to have some place of peace in your life at some point, maybe even 1 hour a day. and it can't be drinking beer in a man cave.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to find peace somewhere.
I like that. A warrior needs a healer.
You need a healer.
I never heard of that one.
And I know, not to become disaster mode, but in the SEAL teams, just to tell a story, we have our groupies, and back in the day, used to call them frog hogs and things like that, right? And all you have to do on the West Coast, all you have to do is go to Danny's or McPee's on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night, and you'll find the wrong person, guaranteed. On the East Coast, they go to Hot Tuna and some other places, right? And that will only bring more chaos and stack pain and suffering onto your life. And you might enjoy it for the moment that you're in it or whatnot, but it's not going to be conducive to health and happiness, and that's for sure. And a lot of my teammates who've had a lot of problems, and for some reason the SEALs, because we're romantics or something, and we have big hearts, we love being in love or feeling like we're in love, but a lot of times it's just lust.
Yeah.
And so we sometimes partner up with the wrong person who kind of like is the female opposite of us, with the sleeved up arm and kind of like that. Not a lot of peace coming from that, right? And then 3 years later, like, man, I'm going through a bad divorce, and this is the third divorce. I mean, I have one friend's been married 4 times. I'm like, why do you keep doing it, man? I like being in love. I don't think you're falling in love. I don't think that's what's happening. You're looking in the wrong places. But then they're wondering why they're not. It's just constant chaos. But they're finding the wrong person because they're looking in the wrong places, and they know what they need inside. They know they want this. They want a partner, a best friend, a teammate. But they're finding the wrong person who's bringing chaos, and they're spiraling, and they keep looking. It's kind of like what I say is like when I hunt elk, right? I go to a place where I think there's good elk and whatnot, and usually there are, right? I know my little spots. But if I go to a place and my hunting spot is a bad place where I know it's going to be bad, always bad, it generally is bad historically, then you're going to get what you get. You're going to get what you're searching for, where you're trying to find it at. And that's why I don't go to bars and clubs, and I encourage people not to go to bars and clubs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're onto something so good there. You talk about our heroes, and when we use our SEALs, I mean, that's the top of the, that's the top of the food chain there. But, use them as an example. These are servant-hearted men and women who have trained and to an elite level, and they are the tip of the spear, right? So they are essentially, let's just say, the best example of a servant-hearted machine that's mission first. So now you have that one component, which is powerful. But like we said earlier, they're servant-hearted, and a servant-hearted man or woman is going to be more affected by the difficulty and the kind of some of the grief, tragedy, sadness, the carnage that they see. So we know that exists, but we also know that we are caring, loving people. So we are going to be looking for love, but the type of love we need is the supportive, the good love, right? But that's not the one that's at the bars. That's not the one that's out there, like readily available. That one takes a little bit more searching for. So we know that those two things exist. We're servant-hearted. We're ready to serve. We're ready to take on the mission. We're going to consume an incredible amount of difficulty, but we also need love. And so if we're going the wrong direction for that love, now we're already tipping the scale, the wrong direction. But then you add alcohol to that. And I think this is the one that maybe there's some gain here. Like maybe there's some ground here. And what I'm about to say, I know it's not the most popular thing, but you almost, if you go into these noble, servant-hearted professions, you're almost better off saying, I'm going to go into this, but I'm going to go into it and remove alcohol from the equation, because that's the tiebreaker there. If you go into this profession and you do alcohol, well, now, even if you're able to find that love that we're actually, probably that we're really searching for, the supportive, now you've got two things working not in your favor, the alcohol and the trauma.
Right.
And I think alcohol, when you look at our professions, it's cost us more than anything else. If we could go into this field without alcohol, I think we would probably give ourselves a fighting chance. I don't know that that's possible, but there's just got to be some sort of disciplinary component on the alcohol, because that is where it tips the scale, I think.
I so much agree with you. So 100%, all my friends and people I know have committed suicide. Alcohol was a part of it. Bill Mulder, who was a retired guy like me on the teams, and he committed suicide while on FaceTime with his wife. Drank a half a handle of whiskey before he did it in this truck out here. 100% of my friends that committed suicide were drunk when they did it. And I guarantee if they're sober, they would never have did it. And for everybody out there, Alcohol is a straight liability. Sadly, in our professions, when I was a brand new guy, 19 years old at SEAL Team 1, the first thing we did was had a keg out on the beach and we played volleyball over beer at the SEAL team.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like tough guys can't talk and laugh and joke around unless we're tipping one back.
Yeah.
It's okay, everything in balance. But when alcohol becomes like a part of your pattern of life, it's a liability. President Trump is sober. He doesn't drink. Why? Because his brother was an alcoholic. And he saw how it devastated his life. Alcohol will only devastate. It just is. That's what it does.
Well, I know when I came on, it was, we'd have choir practice, right? That's what we call it. And it was everybody getting together to drink. And not only was it an accepted part of the culture, it was expected. That's the way you deal with things. That's the only way you can bond. It's like we talk about love. We romanticized alcohol. It was like a love. And everybody's got to make their own decisions when it comes to whether they drink or not. We spoke recently. I haven't had a drink in months. When I retired, one of the things I thought about was, I don't have to, as chief, you can't hardly ever drink because you never know when you're going to get called. I thought, well, I'll be able to do that now. But then I also know some people that when they retire, they kind of crawl into a bottle for a couple of months and some never find their way out. Because coming away from professions like ours is a hard transition. Going back to being a regular person takes time. And for me, I weighed the options. I could drink, go out with some friends, just relax, have fun, or sit around the house, maybe have a glass of bourbon, a cigar, watch a game. Yeah. That'd be cool. But what are the possible negative consequences? And really, when I thought about not drinking, I didn't see a negative. Yeah, do I miss it sometimes? It's fun. Everybody enjoys doing it, right? But what's better for me, for my health, mentally, emotionally, what's better for my family? So for me right now, I've hit pause, and I got to tell you, I feel good. And I don't care if I never have another drink or not. I know we've talked before about, your relationship with alcohol and the culture you came in up as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to what we've been saying. I mean, we embrace alcohol in our profession, and it's not until you make the decision to be sober that you start to you get the wisdom of hindsight, and what you see is that alcohol is not our friend. I mean, we embrace this thing like it. We bring this, this liar, almost this enemy, into our relationships. We bring it into our network. And we celebrate it. We, like you said, I like the way you said it. We romanticize about alcohol. Whether it's the bourbon and a cigar or the keg on the beach. I mean, we do. But the reality is, it has taken a lot from us, and it does. I mean, not just impair us, but it almost makes us incapable of being as capable as we really are. And because of that alone, I'm not saying that everyone needs to not drink. I'm sober now for 10 months, just making the decision one day just that, I was gonna try it. Well, the backstory, I was gonna try it because it almost cost me my relationship. And that was part of that transitioning out of the police profession into the private world, and just kind of how that's a whole nother story that I'm sure we could talk about as well. Just coming off of that, the stress, the high pressure stress. And when you don't have it, you almost feel so inadequate. You almost start to manufacture it. And I think that's what I was doing, and alcohol was part of that. So making the decision to not drink, I see that, I used to joke with my friends and say stuff like, man, I'm a really good guy when I don't drink. And that should have been my clue the whole time. It's like, maybe I shouldn't be drinking. But yeah, you start to see that it isn't our friend. It has never been our friend. All things in moderation. Yeah, you can certainly have a drink and a celebratory thing, here and there. But you got to recognize that you are not going to be able to show up as your best self if alcohol is part of your daily routine. Period. And then when you start to include a daily consumption of stress, adrenaline, and trauma, well, you really need to, I think it's important to kind of revisit that relationship with alcohol, just so that you can show up for those things that you really love the most, that matter the most: your family, your kids, really your health.
We have that same, might have changed a little bit because we got a little smarter, within special operations, but the culture was when I first came in, and way before my time, especially during the Vietnam War and whatnot, was if I can't drink with you, I can't fight with you. If I can't drink with you, I can't trust you. And then in the SEAL teams, we had the thing where, you don't quit. So everything to excess. So once the rounds of shots start coming out, I mean, you're 20 shots into it. And this is what's happening when you're 19, 20, and you're being raised this way because you're earning your trident, you're earning the trust of your fellow brothers, your older warriors and whatnot. And you don't realize that, but then by the time you're 25, you're an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Excessive alcoholic, but you don't know it because it's just a part of our culture. It's the warrior ethos culture.
Yeah.
And if you can't get in a good bar fight, then how are we going to trust you when the rounds start slinging around in a gunfight, right? So how do you back from that when that's been so ingrained in how we just kind of do business and show that we're tough and we can hang and we can get after it with the best of them? How do you reverse that course when it's such a solid part of who we are and what we do, and taking things to extreme? And then as we gotten smarter in the wear and tear of whatnot, we realized, like, you know what? I actually have more clarity. I think better, and I can be more mission focused when I'm sober. I can do better in my relationships. I can sit down and listen to my wife talk about her day a little bit better when I'm not thinking about, drinking or doing these other things. I can take care of those around me and be a better leader when I'm sober, and actually be an example by not drinking in front of them. Because how many leaders, as we're growing up, we're tipping them back in front of us. This is how you are. My first platoon chief was a drunk. And that was what the example was. Be like that. Be like, that sergeant kind of guy. And now we're like, that wasn't that smart and that's not good. We can do better. We need to do better. And if all these suicides that we're having in and outside the ranks aren't making us wake up, I don't know what will be. So now's probably the time. It has to be the time, way past the time, to start changing the dynamic and implicating or adding things in that make sense. And I think pushing sobriety is probably a huge factor in limiting the suicides and other things that are such negative consequences of our professions.
That platoon leader example you just gave, I think this is powerful. Like, this is a good index point for us. We all have a supervisor, a commander, a platoon leader who we knew that did this job at such a high level, but man, they had a tight-knit relationship with alcohol. And so what would it look like if we had that same platoon leader who was stout, right? That commander who just did this thing at an incredibly high level, and they were sober. I loved hearing, the president didn't drink. And I love that because while I was on my journey here, just to see if I could, I thought, you know what, if I can't stop drinking, it started off for a month. I was like, I'm just not going to drink for a month. And I wasn't really even that big a drinker anyway, but I just thought, man, and I'm getting older. I'm going to see if I can do this. And then a month led to a quarter, and a quarter led to another. And now I'm 10 months in, and I'm like, man, yeah, this is being tough. Like, this is saying, when I go out with somebody that I really like, and we have that perfect, scenario where having a drink and a cigar, to be able to say, no, I'm gonna make this 12 months. That's strong. And so I wished I had tried something like this when I was a chief for the PD. I think that might have got some distance if I'd taken on this type of campaign then. But if more leaders did, I know the power of influence. Like, that's probably, if there's anything that I am more intrigued by, it's the power of influence. I talked earlier about the people before us, the generations before us laid these tracks, and they did it with influence because they had influence, because they were good. And so if our current generation, if we lay different tracks and they include sobriety, and you can still go out there and you will do this job at an even higher level because you are 100% present now. You're not struggling with having, your body having to even process the poison that we're ingesting. Now, what kind of leaders, what kind of platoon leaders are we going to be like? What kind of operators are we going to be like out there? We're going to be so dialed in and tough. That influence is going to resonate. And that's when I think we're going to start laying those new tracks and really see a new kind of servant-hearted leader. But it's going to take us acting first and using that influence.
Yeah, 100%. It's the same way also with faith. Like, for me, I think being sober and having God in your life, having your North Star of faith towards your Creator is so important, because there are some things that I realize that you have to give to God. Sometimes I've seen many times some folks do everything right and things go wrong. And that's the unpredictability of the work that we're in, and how the journey of life is. You could do everything right and still things could go wrong. And then you see a person who does everything wrong and things go right. They win the lottery. You're like, oh, what? How? This is just the unpredictability of life as it goes along, as we're traveling and journeying on our own paths. And, but the one thing I find a lot of solace in is compartmentalizing some things and just giving it to God.
Yeah.
Where it's just love, grace, and forgiveness, because there's some things you couldn't have prevented, but you'll kick yourself, to death over it. But there's really not much you could have done. These things just happen. It's like a natural disaster, which causes so much havoc. And, we just had the flooding from the storm up in Alaska, where so many people lost their homes, and we had 3 fatalities in that. And what do you blame Mother Earth and nature for that? If that's like, who do you put the blame on? How do you recover from that? But you have to. Yeah. But some of those things you have to give to God in a way, and those experiences. And I realize that's also been a big helper too. It's like putting the things in the right places. Some people call it compartmentalization. Some people call it other things. But knowing that, like, I could take this on, and some of these things, this is a God thing, and He knows best, and I got to be okay with it, and I have to turn the corner and continue moving forward, I think is a big healer as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Faith has always been something important for me. The family I was raised in was always faith, family, and friends, and faith was always first. And I think if you don't have that component, it makes everything much, much harder. I'm not saying you can't get through life without it, but I found, for me personally, the struggles are real for all of us, but my struggles are much harder if I don't have my faith at the center of my life. And hey, man, I'm flawed, sinful person just like everybody else, and I struggle, but I'm trying. I'm trying to do better every day.
Yeah, I mean, I that's when you get into like, strength and weakness, right? Like that's really when you start trying to figure out how do you maintain being a warrior and all of your training and all of your skill set, but yet giving it over to God. Like, that's powerful. Like, and if you ever want to test yourself, that's the way to do it right there. Because I'll tell you what, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Faith, if there were ever a solution to anything and everything we're trying to figure out to better support, better protect our men and women and their families, it's faith first. Right. But putting it into practice is where that's where the rub is, right? Like, how do we do that? And I've always, there was a person who shared with me once that, when you go into these difficult situations, when you see these situations where you've done everything right and it still doesn't work out in your favor, they shared with me, well, you don't have to look any further than Jesus. Look what He did, everything right. And everyone turned on Him, but that turned out to be the greatest thing for us. So, I just think that if you can ever find yourself in life with a difficult hand dealt to you, you don't really have to look any further than our faith to see that, man, if you can have one thing in common with JC, then you're probably doing all right. And if that little bit helps, then hey, you know what? Run with it, because I think that's truth.
Well, I like what you talked about weakness, and the Bible tells us that God's power is made perfect in our weakness. It's when we are weak that we really decide we turn it all over to God, and through that submission, that's when God's power is on full display. When we realize we're not in control, we're not the ones running the show here. God's got a plan and a purpose for all of us, and as soon as we get with that plan and purpose, understand our mission, understand God's where the power comes from, that's when things start to fall into place. It doesn't mean things will be easy. God tells us we're going to have trouble in this world, but we always know that there's something better on the other side because His plan is perfect.
I tell you what, I submit it all the time. So a lot of our operations are in helicopters. And so you got $1 million worth of training, great technology, weapon systems, all that stuff. And in Afghanistan, we load up in those CH-47s or 60s, and we all load up. And I remember, during this one deployment out there, I'm the platoon chief, and I would pray every time. I'd pray not just for myself, but also for everybody in my platoon. And I let them see me pray right there on the back of the ramp as the ramp would be closing, because you're really submitting and giving it to God. Because when you're flying around in a tin Coke can, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. You can't fight back. There's nothing you can do. We've had rounds go through the fuselage on a couple of missions at us, and it is what it is. I mean, if you're not giving that to God, and you're literally in God's hands, and the pilot who you never met personally, Like your life and everything is in their hands, and you have to give some of those situations to God. I wonder, and it boggles my mind how some people today feel like they believe in nothing. Because if you believe in nothing, I don't know how you can draw upon the strength you need to get through something and those hard things that are thrown at us in life. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, just life in general, you're going to get thrown some hard shit. And some things you just have to find that strength that only the great I am can give you. That's what I've always found. And you know what happens? 2 or 3 missions into it, you see your new guys starting to put their head down and praying too.
Yeah.
Just like you're saying, when the leader starts representing, and I'm praying for everybody, and I'm also hoping that, I don't cry or scream like a little bitch if I die in a fiery crash, because I want to just die and get torn apart in a helicopter crash if we get shot down. I don't want to like get stuck in there and I'm slowly burning and screaming and hearing the last thing from their platoon chief is just screaming like a stuck pig. I didn't want that either, but that was like a selfish thing. Like, let me die, just die, not slow die. That's my little fear anyways. Little vulnerable weak. That's my weakness. I don't want to slow die in pain where I'm screaming like, I want to do like John Wayne kind of death.
Yeah. Then we all, it's interesting though. Like you, I've seen a lot of people lately. I feel like talk about, well, I don't know whether I believe in God or not, and just almost like, I guess, an agnostic approach, and that always interests me because I feel like probably they haven't just done enough time thinking about it, because like you almost like just look at the stars one day and you look at a star and to think that, well, that star doesn't even exist, it's ancient, like it's just the light hasn't stopped burning yet from just that alone should cause you to at least consider there's probably something bigger out there. Even when you look at, go to any Alcoholics Anonymous, that's part of the 7 step. They believe in a higher power. The Bible talks about the devil cites, the Bible. So like there's no one other than the people that we're talking to that don't believe. I think that when you're agnostic, I feel like you just probably haven't spent enough time really considering important things, because there is so much to be amazed about, and there's gotta be something bigger out there. And I think it's once you start practicing it, once you start putting any type of, with our faith, just any biblical principles into motion, you kind of start to see little things make sense. And maybe it's our bodies just firing up and finally responding to the absolute truth that exists within us. But yeah, you really don't, to people who just say, I don't know if I believe, I really think you haven't looked in, maybe internally enough to kind of just see how could this whole miracle work otherwise. Anyway, that's
I agree. Someone said it best. They're like, all you have to do is just stand there on planet Earth and look around you, and you realize you're on a planet that's just floating in nothingness, in a space of endlessness. And we can't even understand how gravity is holding us on with a little bit of atmosphere onto this Earth, and we're sitting on a molten lava and rock that's boiling up in the center of the Earth, and it's all happening, all come together. But when there's creation, it points to that there has to be a creator. You can't put a piece of tin out there, aluminum, in the middle of the sun, and in a million years hope that turns into a Coke can with all the nice writing and the description, the brand name. It's not going to happen. But I'm just a lowly little human being, and I just look at it in that respect, like I'm at awe. And that's why we actually have our programs out in the wilderness, up in the mountains and on ranches and things like that, because you have to get out of the urban jungle and create some of that white space to hear the silent voice of your creator within creation, to get away from all that noise that we've created in modern day society that just takes your attention away. And that's why probably everybody has a little bit of that attention disorder deficit, whatnot. Where there's always some honeydew or something to do. Everything's so busy. So no one takes the time to reflect on the priorities of life and what's important, from big to small, from macro to micro, right? But when everybody that I met in my walk of life that has put God first in the priority of life has, for the most part, solid profession, solid family, strong kids. It just lines everything up in priority. Once you put God first, it just lines everything up the right way. And the folks, and I worked with a lot of great pagans back in the day who are great in their own right as far as operators and whatnot. But once you take them out of the field of operating, their world and life and all the things they got going around there is kind of screwed up.
Yeah.
You know, it's not really in order, it's disorder. So I think the alignment of proper order for health and happiness of humans has to come with that higher power, the creator, what I call God. To me, of course, is following Christ, JC. But I'm not pushing that on anybody. But I think that just lines everything up right. And then from there, your moral compass is aligned to true north.
Mm-hmm.
If you love God right, you'll love those around you properly. You'll be able to give love, receive love properly. You'll have more care, concern, more empathy, more compassion. It just lines everything up properly.
Okay.
So I wonder why people just don't do that first. Just line up right.
Now, one of the things I really want to make sure we get into is the checkpoints strategy. And I got to tell you, your book, Checkpoints, I think I'm on my third time through the book. And every time I read it, I pick up something else, something, sticks a little more. It's a very insightful book. You're very vulnerable about your own story, your own journey. Something else I like is you're brutally honest about where we are and where we need to go, and also how we get there. It's not just talking about how bleak things are. It's actually a blueprint, man. It's a strategy on how to be supporting our first responders the way that we need to. What I'd like to let everybody hear, especially those who may not know you, your story, your book, is how did Checkpoints even get started? What was that spark that got you down the track on Checkpoints, and what kind of change have you seen through its implementation?
Yeah, well, the real story about Checkpoints, the backstory is, it involves a call that I responded to as a very young patrol officer. I didn't realize it at the time, but in responding to this call, and I'll just tell you the story about that call, if that's
absolutely, I'd love to hear it.
So just to set up the context, so I was I started my police career when I was 22 years old. So I'd been a police officer for about 4 years around this time, and dispatched to a call about a missing 3-year-old girl. In the comments on the call sheet just said that a little girl had been missing for, I think it said 15 minutes or something. And so just like, anyone marked a route to the call and arrived there. And when I pulled in to the location, I got met by a group of people came out like running towards my patrol car. So I let dispatch know that I had arrived, and to start me a one-man cover. There's a group of people coming towards my police car, and they got out of my police car, and this man is carrying this little girl, and he hands her to me. And she's drenched, she's wet. And anyway, so he hands me this little girl, and I quickly realized this is my missing 3-year-old girl. And so I tried to do CPR on this little girl, and what I would learn during the course of that was that the man who had handed her to me was her father. He had found her floating in a swimming pool. And so I was doing CPR on this little girl, and I called for the fire department and called for an ambulance, and trying to recall how to do CPR on a 3-year-old. And it's just a really weird, chaotic scene. Just kept hoping this little girl through the CPR was just going to wake up and kind of spit up a bunch of water, like you see in the movies, I guess. And it never happened. The long story short is that the days that followed this event were just very different to me. It was I distinctly recall this was my first day back at work. It was my Monday. We were on 8-hour shifts. And this had happened on my Monday. I was on the evening shift, and I could not shake two really just defined thoughts that really, even today, as I tell the story, still linger. It's the look in a man's eye when he hands you his little 3-year-old daughter and asks you to save her life, and then you don't, right? And then the other distinct, just vivid memory is the sound of this little girl's mother when she'd learned that her little daughter wouldn't survive, and the scream that she let out. Like again, unfortunately, I can still picture it, and this is over 25, almost 26 years ago. But the story about Checkpoints is that the days removed from this were all really kind of a blur to me. Again, I was a 26-year-old man. I'd been a police officer for 4 or 5 years at the time. I had seen plenty of people killed in my life at this point. I was a patrol officer in a very busy district, and there was something about this loss of life that I just couldn't shake. And I didn't know why. I just knew that, I guess if I really could describe any emotion, I just felt sad. I just felt sad for this family. I felt sad for that dad. And it wasn't until the third day removed that I realized I wasn't really eating. I wasn't really sleeping, and just kind of couldn't shake it. Well, on that third day, I was out on patrol, and it was an evening shift again. I was parked over at a parking lot typing up a report on my computer, and I get a message on my MDT from really the most unsuspecting of police officers. It was an officer named Lee Bollinger. Lee was a very senior officer, veteran officer. This guy was, just an old, crusty, negative Cajun guy, and the type that he'd tell you his opinion whether you want to hear it or not. Negative, and he was mean as a rattlesnake. But this guy sends a message to my computer and just says location with a question mark. And my initial thought was, man, this is kind of the last person I want to talk to right now. But I also didn't want any problems with this guy either. So I send him my location, and within a few minutes he pulls up window to window to my patrol car. And I roll down my window, and he very directly looks at me and says, "Reuben, how are you?" And I said to him, "I'm fine, Lee." And he gets right into it. He goes, "Reuben, that call you went to the other day," he says, "those can be tough." And so I immediately knew what he was, there for, right? And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Man, I wish I could have saved that little girl's life." That's what he says to me. He says, "Reuben, 20 years ago," he says, "I was a young patrol officer." He says, "I was working downtown Dallas." He said, "and I responded to a crash, a pickup truck." He said, "there was a 9-year-old boy in the bed of this pickup truck." And he says, "This car crashed, and this pickup truck rolled on top of this little boy." And he says, "When I got to the scene, Reuben," he says, "that little boy was alive." He goes, "I spoke to him." And he says, he goes, "may have been in shock, but I talked to him." And he says, "We lifted that truck up." He goes, "We pulled that little boy out and we rushed him to the hospital, downtown Baylor Hospital." And he says to me, "Reuben, that little boy died that night." He says, "and I've spent the last 20 years of my career angry." He said, "I've been mad at everyone." He said, "I've been mad at this police department. I've been mad at the police chief, been mad at this city, been mad at the mayor." And he says to me, "Reuben, I just don't want to see the same thing happen to you." He says, "Why don't you go talk to somebody?" That's what he says to me, right? This is a guy I don't even really know or particularly like. And I remember sitting there window to window, my squad car, looking at him, and I could not understand what I was feeling, but I was drawn into this, what he was sharing with me. I was just drawn in. And he says to me, "You go to church." He goes, "Why don't you go talk to somebody at your church?" That's what he says to me, right? And I looked at him and I said, "Okay, Lee." And without even really thinking, acknowledging, I put my police car in drive and I drove off. And I drove because there was a church that I knew of. It was about 1.5 miles away. It was a Catholic church. And I drove straight to that church that night. And I pulled up in that parking lot and I got out of my patrol car. I found the area where they live, and I started knocking on the door that night. And I knocked, probably scared the heck out of that priest. And he answered the door that night. Mm-hmm. And he says, "Officer, what's the problem? What's wrong?" And I just blurted out. And I said, "I can't eat, can't sleep, into this call." And he's trying to, poor guy's trying to figure this out. And I tell him, I said, "I went to this call on this little girl. She drowned and her dad handed her to me. And he asked me to save her life. And I couldn't. And I said she died, and told him everything." And so he says to me, he goes, "Officer," he says, did you know this little girl?" I said, "No." I said, I didn't know her." And he says, "Did you know the family?" And I said, "No, I never met him before in my life." And that's what he says to me. He says, "Officer," he says, "what you're describing," he says, "is grief." He says, "You're not eating, you're not sleeping." He says, "You're grieving for someone you don't even know." And he says to me, he says, "What you're doing, officer," he says, "is you're asking God to give you some of this family's pain so that they don't have to carry it all themselves." And he says to me, he says, "Officer, that is going above and beyond the call of duty." He says, "That is protecting and serving at the highest level." Wow. And, wow. I tell this story really for a couple main reasons. One is that I was a 26-year-old man at the time, and I didn't have a friend or a family member in my life that would have ever reframed that horrible call the way he did. You know, it was a complete reframing of this horrible incident in a way that somehow showed that through my difficulty or my struggle, that there was some sort of nobility in that difficulty, that my pain and struggle there was something noble in it. Like I was trying to take away pain from this family. And you know, it helped me, man. I don't go as far as saying that it changed the trajectory of my career or it saved my life. I messed up plenty since then, but at that particular moment, it helped. And the second thing is that Officer Lee, Lee Bollinger checked on me. He didn't have to. There was no system in place for him to do it. He just did. And he did it with empathy because he understood what I was going through. He did it with compassion because he didn't want to see me go through the same thing. And he didn't tell me, just rub some dirt on it, pack that thing in your locker. He didn't say, let's go drink. He said, why don't you go talk to somebody? He went as far as saying, why don't you go talk to somebody at your church? And he did it at just the right time. Because I'll tell you right now, I wasn't in a crisis, but I was heading towards one. And all I needed was to get to my days off. If I could have made it to my days off, man, I was going to pack that thing down deep. I'd have gone out drinking, done whatever I needed to do to never think about that horrible call again. But, it wasn't until some 25 years later that I'm now the assistant chief and the bureau chief over tactical and special ops. And I get tasked with this crazy assignment to just kind of assess what our resources were in the Dallas Police Department, why, because we continue to see our men and women involved in alcohol-related incidents or domestic-related incidents. And so I'm on this project some 25 years later, and I'd realized that I was meant to take perfect note of that incident because it is that incident, some now almost 26 years ago, was where the checkpoint strategy is modeled after.
One thing on that, I think Officer Lee did a tremendous thing there. And that was very insightful and something he had to live with and deal with, and the burden that he held and carried for 20 years with that 9-year-old kid that he couldn't save and a lot of people, and I've had a lot of teammates, including myself, deal with this. What he didn't say, what I think also was a part of it, was that he was angry at God. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, when tragedy strikes, because of the unfairness of it, are angry with God. And instead of giving it to God, they get angry with God, and it changes the path in which you handle it and how you heal from it. And that's a choice. That's a fork in the road of like, all right, God, I did everything I could. It's noble, like you said, of taking the family's grief because you have the big heart. And that's what we talk about. When you have the big heart, that's why you're serving. You get hurt the most when you can't save and help and be of assistance. But where do you take it from there? Do you give it to God, or do you get angry at God and blame him? And what he did was say, don't go through 20 years of anger like I did. Give it to God. And you went straight away. And I think that was such a huge, great mentorship or a bit of advice, because he cared. He didn't want you to bear that burden like he did.
Absolutely. And it was, we talk a lot about moral injury on our show here. And we talk about how moral injury is either witnessing, perpetuating, or failing to stop something that goes against your moral compass. Obviously, for you and for Lee, it was failing to stop something. You wanted to save that girl. The thing is, she was unfortunately far beyond the point of anyone being able to save her. If she could have been saved, you would have done it that day. But it just unfortunately wasn't going to happen. But failing to stop something like that definitely causes that wound, that injury, right? We talked a little before about the difference between wounds and injuries. Wounds and scars. And it sounds like Lee was still carrying around a wound that never healed 20 years later. And it sounds like he knew it. He was aware of what was causing him to be so bitter and angry. You talk about this story, which, brother, it tugs at the heart. That's a hard story to hear. So I know it's got to be hard to talk about. But with you, I see healing. That wound is now a scar. It will always be with you, but you found some hope and you found some healing. And it sounds to me like with checkpoints, that's what you're trying to offer to others as well.
Yeah, there's so much there. The Lee part of this, I think you're right. Like, if you think about Lee was looked at as a negative, disgruntled, opinionated officer, when the reality is Lee was a lot more than that. Man, Lee was somebody who was hurting, right? Lee was somebody who very likely was angry with God about what he, and I think it's almost poetic that here's Lee, who, if that is the case, and maybe we'll have to get Lee on the show one day to get him to explain this to us, but if that's the case, which it sounds like it could, because he was probably losing the battle with peace if he was that negative and that anger. But then to come full circle, Lee checks on me, and then not only does he give me good guidance, but he actually says, why don't you go talk to somebody at your church? So he almost has to face that piece right then and there. But man, my hope is that gave him the healing, and it should, because the more we get this program out there, and I know there's a lot of agencies looking to strategy and you know, our servicemen and women and emergency rooms now for nursing, you know, that story is, there's a piece to that Lee spent 20 years of service negative, angry, and bitter, and being almost, you know, grouped into a certain type of person, when the reality is Lee was a servant-hearted, you know, man who came to this profession and still found it in him to try to check on me, to try to prevent me from going down that path, and then gave me that guidance to not only go talk to somebody, but go talk to somebody at your church.
That sage advice comes from somebody like a father to a son through lived experience of, like, son, I worked all my life in the coal mine. I don't want you to do that. I want you to go to college, get education, and have a better path and a better life, a little bit easier on you. He suffered, and he didn't want you to suffer. And that's internally, he probably was a guy like all of our old, you know, leaders had, tough, strong, who hardened their hearts and souls, built up their walls as fortresses to protect themselves against all that they experienced in the real world, right? And he didn't want that for you. He didn't want you to harden your heart, get crusted over, and be angry. But what the old guard didn't do was, their egos were so big that I got this. I'm going to get cynical. I'm going to get tougher, and I'm going to build up my walls, instead of like, you know what, I need to give this to God. Go to church and go. You need to get some counseling. Go figure this out. Talk to somebody. He didn't want you to do the 20 years of purgatory that maybe he went through in some sort of way, whether he subconsciously or wittingly, you know, thought about that in that way. He just wanted it better for you, like a father to a son. And that's good sage advice. Like, no one wants to, don't walk in these footsteps. I already know what it's like. Go this way.
And you know, Lee, I mean, Neil, to your point, you know, what does this do now? Like, there's the blueprint in this, is when we create this strategy, this checkpoint strategy within organizations, within departments or detachments, what we're creating is a motion of wellness. We're putting wellness in motion, because, you know, we talked about how often this subject of mental health and wellness gets talked about for our veterans, for our servicemen and women, for first responders, but at some point we're in danger of just talking. You know, talk is cheap. Like, you need something more than awareness. And what this checkpoint motion does is it puts action to wellness. It is checking on people, because you feel something when someone checks on you, whether it's appreciation or you get drawn in like the way I did with his guidance and his advice. But really, the goal in this strategy, and the goal that I want, you know, the people who consider the strategy to know, is that the value in this program is not just by checking on our men and women. Often we're some of the most influential people, then we're checking on some of the most impressionable people in our organization, and that's powerful, but that's not it. When you're servant-hearted and you're carrying wounds, you're you know, like we talked about before, you're designed to help people. Through this motion of checking on people, I believe that we are treating our wounds now. We're treating our silent injuries through that motion of checking. And I think that's what Lee was doing. Lee may not, and again, it wasn't institutionalized then. It wasn't part of the structure, but Lee was treating his wounds by doing something for someone else. And not only did he help me in that, you know, kind of that critical, you know, window that I was in, but through his check-in, he's helped create a system that is now helping check on other people. And we know through our research, this is not only just a good model practice. But this thing is saving people's health. It's saving their relationships. It's saving their careers, and in many cases, it's saving people's lives. So it's like that's the power of service. It's taking those difficulties, and despite the difficulties and the wounds, putting a motion in place to help people. That's where the real, that's where we really start to, I guess, like I said, or see that green, that green, grass in front of us, and that gain.
Well, one thing you've talked about a couple of times is about influence and the real influencers in the department, and where the messaging, the change in the conversation, the change in the culture has to happen. And that kind of ties in with something else you said before, is in the first responder world, and I believe in the military world as well, we can't wait for somebody else to save us. It's our job to save ourselves. Now, yes, take advantage of the resources that are out there, no question about that. But how do we get people receptive to actually taking those resources? Because there's tons of opportunities. I know the work we're doing with AWA and R3 with the Warriors Refuge, people that go, it changes their lives. But how do you get people receptive to do that? And how has Checkpoints changed that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's what I believe has been missing from the wellness equation. Like, we're talking about, again, these servant-hearted men and women. We're talking about warriors here, right? We're talking about warriors, guardians, universal at different times. That's a powerful, that's a powerful characteristic of a man or woman to take on this role. You cannot support them without having at least a layer of inspiration and motivation rolled up within that wellness. If you just treat it like a triage, or just treat it like a support mechanism, it ain't going to hit its mark. But if you hit with a layer of inspiration and motivation within this, I think you start to get, that's where you start to see the eyebrows raise. And the way I message this strategy is, there is no one coming to our rescue in the mental and emotional health space. If you're sitting here waiting for the academia world to write more about what it is to take on these types of professions, you're mistaken, because they are going to write more about it, and that's good, because that's what they do. But they're not going to give you a solution. And this is the academia's world, is to research and write. Even the medical and science world will tell you that there are biological effects that happen within our body when we're in these high pressure stress situations. We everything from our sleep disorders to digestive systems to now even more serious ailments like diabetes and cancers that can be created within our bodies because of these high stress, pressure filled roles. But they're creating awareness and telling you, they're not giving you a solution, nor are they. That's not their role. Legislators, and I'm appreciative for the legislation that's been passed and written to better support our first responders, but a lot of it is reactive. A lot of it is once we're already struggling, once we're already suffering. And so I say all that to say this: if you are a servant-hearted man or woman and you're in these noble professions of serving, quit waiting for someone to come to our rescue, because they're not. This is our job. We're the ones who are willing to fight. We're the ones to go out to train and be prepared to go on the front lines. We're the ones who have to fix this problem. We're in a large part, we created it, but equally we're going to fix it, and we're going to do it one checkpoint at a time. You take your wounds, you take your scars, your injuries, and reach out to someone else in an effort to prevent them from going through the same thing you did, and you're healing your wounds. You're saving their trajectory, and you're healing your wounds, all within one cycled motion. And we're gonna create this motion and replicate this motion so repeatedly that we aren't going to have any other choice but to start healing from within our culture, one checkpoint at a time. And I mean, I've seen this motion at work. I've seen the really just the stout men and women in Dallas. We had a lot of our tactical guys were the ones who took on this cause first. Because I told them, I said, if you go out there and check on somebody, and nobody's going to question you. If I do it, they're going to be like, oh man, Chief's after me. What's the problem?
Right.
Peer support. Come on. They have their role. But if you do it with your stripes, with your skins on the wall, nobody will question you. And everybody else will follow suit, because influence is a powerful thing.
We're trying to do some things differently in the SEAL teams, let alone special operations. It's not really hitting perfectly, but I understand the intent of it, right? Where we have leadership courses for your different levels of leadership for like your platoon. leading petty officers are like your they would be called like your platoon sergeants, and then your troop chiefs, and then your officer leadership and the platoon commanders courses and things like that. And we use words like resiliency, mental toughness, right? Because sometimes words matter depending on the size of a person's ego, right? So if you start talking about emotions or wellness, a SEAL will be like, what's going on here? Like they'll start like closing up on you, you know. You realize they're not open, they're not taking it to heart. So when we talk about that with the leadership, like let's talk about intrusive leadership. Let's talk about the different layers of leadership and how you check on your people. You actually care, and you go like, hey, how's the family? How's the kids? How you doing? You know, like when there's a traumatic incident, recent check-in, like within the first week, like Lee caught you at the right time, out of the blue when you're already pondering and having that post-op reflection yourself. So a recent check-in is important. And then episodic and periodical check-ins of someone who actually cares. Like a leader that actually cares, imagine that. A leader at different levels that actually cares about their people because they've lived it probably. They've been there, done that. And trying to implement these things or checkpoints and teaching it at the different leadership levels, all the way up from the police chief to the deputy chiefs, all the way down to the sergeant, the captain, the sergeant, the lieutenant, right? Know your people, take care of your people, and teach it at the different leadership courses. So even if you're more of an introverted kind of leader, you're at least given the tools or taught the tools of how to check on your people,
Absolutely.
how to actually care.
That's one thing I can say about you, Reuben. We never worked directly together. We were different agencies, but one thing I'll say about you, there was never any question that you cared about your people. I know sometimes from that high a level in an agency, it's hard for your troops to see that. I hope they saw what I see, because you are somebody that really cares. And I think this checkpoint program is a perfect example of what that looks like for a leader to really do something impactful, something tangible in the agency. And in your book, you talk about it in great detail, but just to kind of break it down for those who may not know, kind of tell us what a checkpoint would look like, how you would choose checkpoint officers, and then how do you find out who you need to check on?
Yeah, so the story of how we came up with kind of the nuts and bolts of the program really happened in a focus group conversation where I was talking with a group of patrol officers. I was asking them, what kind of resources are you utilizing for your mental health? Are they accessible, and why wouldn't you use them? And as you can imagine, a chief talking to a group of younger patrol officers about their mental health, they weren't having it. Like they were telling me anything. I heard everything from, Chief, I wouldn't share my grocery list with peer support, let alone my personal feelings. Like I heard all kinds of stuff, right? And it wasn't until this one conversation where, this one patrol officer was just having he was having a visceral response to my questions. His arms were folded, and his head was like red. He was not having it. And I asked him, I said, "Officer, is there something on your mind?" I said, something you want to share with us? Like he was just sitting in his chair. You could just tell he was hating this conversation. And I said to him, please, speak freely. Right? Something on your mind you want to share with the rest of us, let's hear it. And he looked at me very directly and said, he said, "Chief, I want to know why you care." And he says, "You've been on this police department a long time. You've been on the command staff a long time." He says, "What have you ever done for our mental health?" And he says to me, "Why do you care now?" And I thought, wow. For one, I was thinking maybe I shouldn't have given this guy the floor, right? Like maybe because it just got awkward in here. But it was, his question was, man, it was valid. Like I had been a police chief, I've been a police officer for 29 years. I was police chief for, assistant chief, deputy chiefs, and for 8 years, never talked about mental health, really didn't. And so I thought about how to respond to him. And I think what I said to him is really worth capturing here, because it was all improv. I had nothing on my mind.
Straight from the heart.
And he had just thumped me, like I hit that one hit in the chest. What had I done? Well, I hadn't done anything. And my answer to him, was somewhere along the lines of, I said, I don't know. I don't know why I haven't done anything about this before. And I don't know why I haven't talked about mental health before. And the backstory that, was that I was going through a divorce at the time. And that was like I know Will, no, I've told Will this before, but I struggled. Policing didn't really ever affect me as adversely as divorce did. Divorce was a crisis. Like, we talk about divorce like, first in our professions, like first, second, third marriage is a charm. But the reality is those things hurt, especially if you have kids. And I don't know that there were days that I would go into work and I couldn't even breathe, man. I mean, I literally couldn't breathe. And I was assistant chief. I worked in the top of headquarters in a big office, and I couldn't help but remove the real truth that our men and women were going through divorces. We're out there on the front lines. Yep. And I said something to him like, I said, I'm probably the last person that should be talking about y'all's mental health. And I said, there are days when I come to work and I can't even breathe myself. And I said, I don't know what the answer to that is. And I said, I don't know why. I said, and I shared something about my boys, all improv from the heart. And I just said, and I said, maybe, I said, I know this. I said, one of the things that probably scares me the most, I said, is I got two teenage boys. And I said, and one of the things that scares me is that I worry that one day my two boys are going to come up to me and say, Dad, I think I want to be a police officer. And I said, but what's interesting is that it doesn't scare me because of what might happen to them. Like, I think they'd be great police officers. They're both strong, smart, kind boys. They'd be great police officers. And I have no fear of my boys being a police officer and getting hurt. I have more fear about what might happen to their mind if they came into this profession. And so I said to this officer, I said, so maybe, to your question of why do I care? Maybe that's why I care. So that maybe if they do go into this profession, maybe things can be better for them. And I sat there and it got quiet. It stayed quiet, for every bit of half a minute or so. And that officer who was sitting there with his arms folded, he unfolded his arms. He sat up in his seat and he says to me, and it's something I'll never forget. He says, Chief, you want to know what the hardest part of my job is? He says, it's the sound of screaming mothers at homicide scenes. And he shares a story with me about a murder scene that he was on, I guess, a few days earlier, where a mom, there was a 13-year-old boy that was murdered. And he said that the mom of that child ran after the medical examiner van as it drove off with her son. And then another officer weighed in and said something about the most difficult part of my job, he says, is the contorted bodies at fatality car crashes. Says they never forget that intersection that they, whether they drive through on or off duty, they picture that wreck, they picture the body. And so I took this model and went, and I had more conversations with different groups. And when I collected everything that they said to me, homicide detectives talked about death notifications being the hardest part of their job. SWAT operators said losing a hostage was one of the most difficult things they dealt with. They said they second-guessed their progressions and their steps. Mm-hmm. And so when you collected all of this information, this is empirical, you collected all of this empirical data, all you really got were things that were emotional. They didn't talk about bullets. They didn't talk about bad guys. They didn't talk about fear of attack. They didn't talk about shift work, callback, late or poor supervision. They talked about things that were emotional. And I couldn't help but collect all that and realize that we didn't have one single support mechanism in place to support us on emotional calls, which were really hidden under the guise of routine. All of those calls, the fatality car crashes, the missing persons, the homicides, those were not critical incidents. Those weren't crisis or critical incidents. Those were routine calls. And every one of them talked about those calls as being the biggest culprit to their mental and emotional health, and we had nothing to support them in it. And so checkpoints became a mechanism to, let's check on people every time they go to a dead body call. Because I think every dead body call, every contorted body, every bullet-ridden body, every hung or self-inflicted wound on a suicide or overdose, Every one of them has the ability to affect us adversely. And it may affect you adversely because it could be anything from the couch, the setting, the environment, the clothes, the age resembled someone you know. Like, it had nothing to do with our ability to be tough or to be able to handle the job. There were so many factors, many of them that could have been influenced by our personal life or off-duty type stuff that could cause that homicide or that loss of life to affect us. And we weren't going to take any of them for granted. So we were going to start this mechanism to just check on everybody. And we weren't even going to ask the question so much like, how are you? We were just basically going to say, hey, Will, this Reuben, just want to check on you, man. I know you went to that suicide call the other day. And you know, Will would say something like, you know, yeah, that was a 20-year-old, you know, hung themselves, whatever it might have been. And so my response would be, as a checkpoint officer, my response would be like, hey, listen, man, sometimes those calls can be tough. Don't let them stack up on you. I'm working with the peer team. I'm working with wellness, whomever. We got some resources that are good. If you or anybody you know at the division needs anything, let me know. Save my number. 15 seconds, man. That was it. It was a 15-second checkpoint, but we were gonna repeat that motion constantly, and we weren't going to take anyone for granted. We wanted to check on the 911 operator, the dispatcher, the line officer, the patrol officer, the physical evidence technician, just to let them know, hey, listen, don't let these things stack up on you. And so that was the motion. Now the next thing I needed checkpoint officers, right? This is where it got funny, because I was a bureau chief over tactical and special ops, right? So I naturally go to my SWAT operators, right? And I'm like, and these guys, you know this, like these SWAT operators, man, these are an interesting group, because they are literally the most functional, dysfunctional group I've ever seen in my life. Like, they are on point when it comes to a mission. But go to one of their after actions or their debriefings, and these guys are on each other about it. Like, they're just like, I mean, you think they'd hate each other, but they don't. They're just, they've figured out their strategy. They know how to get better and evolve and get better every time. But I went up to them and I said, hey, listen, we're gonna do this strategy. I want to check on people, but I want you to do the checking, because nobody will question you. And these guys looked at me like I had three heads. They're like, you want us to do what? I just want you to check on people, man. Just they won't question. We need to start something different in this one space. Anyway, long story short is I got one taker at first, and he was a heavy hitter, man. He was a player in the SWAT world, and I knew, I was like, if I could get this guy to do it, we're going to use that influence. This thing's going to work. And eventually it led to where I told them, I picked 3 checkpoint officers initially, and I said, you guys take the lead on this. You pick who you want to be checkpoint officers. This is your program. And what that SWAT operator, Danny Canetti was his name. He says to me, Chief, if you do it that way, where we take the lead on this, no celebrating, no media, look what we're doing, no new initiative coming from the top. Let us do it like this. You clear. And I said something like, I'll clear the lanes for you. I'll make sure that you can do this, and I'll make sure you have complete autonomy to build this thing, add additional checkpoint or whatever. It's y'all's deal. He says, if you do that, he says, I'll do it. And eventually my 3 checkpoint officers turned into 30, at one point within the first year, I had like 98 people asking to be checkpoint officers. So it was a real powerful initiative. We knew we had something big back then.
Because those first 3 that you that did it, they're respected within the ranks. Yeah, and people they want to acquire what they admire. Ooh. So you pick the best, honorable and respected operators within the SWAT team to lead the charge, and people are like, okay, yeah, I could listen to this guy. But if it was reversed, and you had your admin officer writing what we call the cubicle warrior writing the desk, asking the operator, hey, you okay? What the fuck? Yeah. Don't call me again. You know what I mean? It would really be a problem. But there was a couple of things that I wanted to say something about. And this is why I know Americans, we're just good. We're just good people. And we're good because we do have the biggest hearts. The number one thing that I think that hurts and causes the most moral injuries from the folks, my teammates and others abroad, was when they're on target sites, whether Iraq, Afghanistan, Northern Africa, even Southeast Asia. It's the women and children crying because their husbands, uncles, or brothers or whatnot were killed by us because they were bad guys. They killed Americans. They were playing IDs. They were doing things. And even the enemy We understand the hurt and the pain. The sound's the same. They love their children just as much as our women love our children, as our moms love their children, and vice versa. And it hurts our own souls, even that of the enemy's families. And that's the number one thing I hear echoing that hurts the most, and they keep it down because they don't want to say that, hearing that Afghan mom and the kids crying over her dead husband, even though he's got an AK in his hand, even though he's already been attributed to killing several Americans, leading ambushes, playing IEDs, it's just echoing in their head, almost like cow calling during a rut, just echoes. And there are moments of silence in the quiet places and times of our life. That's when they reflect, and it hurts the most. And the one thing I wanted to say was, going back to the checkpoints, is like when someone's disabled in the line of duty, you get shot in the arm, you lose a leg, something physically debilitating, it's easy to see, easy to recognize. You could get disability, medically retired from your profession. But going off of what we were talking about earlier, tracking it, like, how many deaths do you have to witness? How many shootings, how many homicides? Where is the tracking mechanism in that? Because I could tell you someone's not the same person if they saw 20 suicides, 100 murders. At some point, the mind and soul is worn out. At some point, when does the coach say, hey, you need to take a knee?
Everybody's got a breaking point.
Everybody's got a breaking point. And the best people won't tell you that they're broken inside. They're going to build up and put more bricks on that wall. They're going to try to push out a bigger front of like, I'm okay. Ask anybody who's not okay, hey, you okay? I'm okay. What's wrong? Nothing. Okay and nothing. They're the two things that maybe there's something going on. Anyways, there's got to be a better, with all the algorithms, technology, AI, count it up on them. We started doing training records in the teams, and after one cycle, it's like there's just too much stuff going on. No one can keep account of it. It's the same thing that's happening in the ranks within law enforcement. Within a lot of our cities today, there's just so much. It's some war zones going on out there. So how much can one man or woman experience in a lifetime before it's like, give them a break, because they're not going to ask for it. Help them.
Well, that's one of the things I applaud you for the most, is the fact that we weren't. And you're right. I mean, I can't tell you how many homicides, suicides, calls with dead children I went to. I have no idea. And what I feel guilty about, though, is I couldn't tell you how many my officers have been to. That should be part of my job, is making sure we're tracking that, making sure we're checking to see maybe where is that breaking point. Using that data to actually help us support our people even better. But as far as I know, nobody was tracking that kind of stuff. It's just part of the job. And like you said earlier, these are routine calls. There's nothing routine about calls like that, but we called them routine. One of the things I loved the most when we started implementing checkpoints in Fort Worth was the fact that we were tracking it. We were actually looking to see who was going to these kind of calls. So not only were we able to check in on them, but we're starting to track it. How important was that for you just personally, and how important was that to checkpoints?
Yeah, I mean, I think in order for us to, again, know those thresholds of when one might be too many, we've got to track it. For one, we've got to have at least a tally of how frequently we're going to these calls, because you can go to 5 suicides a year and maybe be fine. But if you went to 3 of those suicides within the last 7 days, that's the problem, right? And so we not only had to look at cumulatively what were we responding to, but what were those time frames, and then the real bigger question becomes, what do we do about it? Like Will talked about these, our soldiers hearing these women and children crying, that's a powerful piece of our role, and I think that we've got to recognize that those things create silent injuries, they create moral injuries, and it doesn't mean we're weak. It actually means exactly what Will said. That's the power of the American servicemen and women, that we go there and go serve at an extremely high level and still feel compassion. Mm-hmm. That makes you elite.
Yes.
That's what needs to be brought to the forefront. It doesn't even brush into the vicinity of weakness. It actually brushes more into the category of why you are the perfect man or woman for this role, because not only can you go out here and conduct and execute an operation and mission, but you still feel compassion. That
means you're good.
It means you're good, man. And so if we took that truth, again, we're going to talk a lot about truth, I think in this show, but But if you took that truth and put it to the forefront, we are never going to remove the sound of crying mothers and children. We're never going to remove the fact that we are going to respond to lifeless, contorted, bullet-ridden bodies. That's okay. It's part of the job. But what can we do either along with it in order to create some sort of healing, some sort of, different response? Because response is everything, right? Like life is 10% what happens to you, 90% how you respond to it. So what if our response became that we were going to create just a motion of awareness to those incidents, let's take the scenario in Afghanistan where you're part of a mission and you're seeing these men and women, obviously, affected by a loss of life of their, but just an acknowledgement that, I always talk about the checkpoints does 4 things that have never been done in American law enforcement. The first thing is it's an outward show of what the cumulative effect of those calls can do, whether it's the screaming mothers in Afghanistan or the awkward silence at a suicide or the contorted body. You're creating an outward awareness of what the cumulative effect of that is, right? And then the second thing we do that has never been done in American law enforcement is we validate the feelings that we know that soldier or that officer is going to have. That soldier is going to remember the cries of that mother. That's okay. But it's acknowledging it and validating it that, hey, those things will stick around for a while. Don't let them sneak up on you. You're validating those feelings. It's never been done in American law. We don't validate those feelings. The third thing, vouching for those resources, right? Our peer support, let's face it, peer support is not bad. I mean, I don't know that it's got the real heavy hitters of our PD assigned to it or ever has. But there are good men and women that work in those places.
Absolutely.
And so what they're in desperate need of is somebody to actually market them. They don't have that. And so we're about to do it. Again, checkpoint officers are heavy hitters. These are the players. And when they vouch for something, it gets some miles, it gets some distance. So that was the third thing we do. And then the fourth thing we were going to do is we were about to put this brotherhood that we share, this powerful brotherhood that we have, we were about to put it on display every single time our men and women went or responded to an incident that could affect them in the emotional space. And the way we were going to put that brotherhood on display was through this, hey, listen, I'm here if you need anything. If you or anyone else needs anything, save my number. Because by doing that, what we had done is first of all, we recognized that powerful brotherhood that we have, the traditions and the support, really the brotherhood that we have had really been reserved up until this point. It had been reserved for those incidents where one of us was, calling for help, or one of us was injured and, in the hospital, battling for our lives, or even worse, on this incredible display of pageantry in our funerals, these 5-mile processions. That's when we showed our brotherhood. And there was a way for us to maintain that, but show it on the front end too. And we were going to do it through this check-in system. We were going to put that powerful brotherhood on display for our men and women. And those were the 4 things that had never been done before in American law enforcement, and been doing it. I think that's why we started to see the first measurable that I ever took captured was the receptiveness to it. The fact that our men and women appreciate it spoke volumes, because let's face it, you look at the last 10 years in our servicemen and women and our law enforcement men and women, and there's been a pretty significant, at least narrative of lack of appreciation for what we're giving up to go into these fields. And so if we can just infuse appreciation, coming from somebody of influence within our ranks, within our units, our squads, man, it gets distance, it gets traction. And so that was the first thing. We were just going to infuse that appreciation in there. And then our men and women can continue to go do that mission, continue to go endure and absorb some of those, those moral injury, but we're going to supplement that along the way with that appreciation for what they're doing, coming from a real influencer within their ranks.
I think that's what Lee did for you. The least expected guy in the ranks, the crusty ass salt of the earth guy, showed up for you.
Yeah.
And really what you're saying, the fourth pillar of that, show up for each other. Sometimes just the presence, the art of just being there. Here.
Talk about showing up, and you talk about, the honor, the nobility in those who choose to serve, even have empathy for the grieving family members of enemies who are trying to kill us. I mean, that says something about the heart of a real warrior, right? And I read something recently that said there was a point, because we talk about recruiting and hiring being, really difficult right now for law enforcement agencies and have been for years. There was a point, and maybe if this is true or not, at Dallas Police Department, recruiting numbers went up almost overnight, 344%. And it said this happened immediately after the ambush on officers at an anti-police protest where officers were protecting the First Amendment rights of those protesters. We had 5 officers killed. Most people would see that and say, I don't want that job. I'm not going to do it. Yet the recruiting numbers went up over threefold. That tells you the kind of people we're talking about. That tells you the kind of heart, the kind of bravery, the kind of compassion, the desire to serve others and make a positive difference in this world. That's the kind of people we're talking about. I love what you said about it's not about weakness. It's about being elite, being the people who really make a difference in this world. And I know that we've talked before about how the impact that assault on July 7th, 2016, 7/7 made on the department, and actually influenced checkpoints, as well as a year prior to that in June of 2015 when there was an assault on the headquarters in downtown Dallas. Can you talk a little bit about both of those incidents and the impact it had? 'Cause I know one thing I read you said was it forever changed the department. It will always be part of your story now. It'll forever change the officers involved, but you decided to do something about it.
Yeah, I'll start with the headquarters shooting. That was a year before, so that was in 2015. Really about a year to the date of the July 7th, 2016 ambush. But the headquarters shooting, what really stood out to me the most was you had a person who a very calculated, planned attack on headquarters, armored vehicle. He had explosive devices planted in the parking lot, and so that when we went out to our squad cars, officers would get he could detonate them and kill officers, and he was just equipped with high-powered rifles, armored vehicle, and opening fire on headquarters. And he was positioned where, as we were responding from each direction, he was just opening fire on officers. And the short version of it is that of all the officers who responded, I think there was 107 total officers who responded. Not one single officer was physically injured. One hurt, I guess, an ankle, but nobody from gunfire. And so we thought that was incredibly significant. But it was one of those situations where one of our SWAT snipers fired. Found the suspect. Eventually, we disabled his vehicle, and a SWAT sniper fired a round with 50 cal and eventually detonated his armored vehicle, and so the guy died and burned. But the departments at the time were not really forthcoming about talking about these things where police had actually taken the life of a suspect. And they just didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want the attention to it. And so by not creating attention to all of the other components of this, like, hey, look at how many officers got fired upon, and unfortunately we were all right, but was everybody okay? And these were all life-threatening situations. Is there any emotional component, any mental component? Nothing. It just went. So I think we silently condition our officers to just suppress those things on their own and deal with it on their own, which now what you find is those officers, it was a life-changing event. You did get fired upon, so you do go home and you think about it and you run all the scenarios of what could have happened. And so the mind kind of gravitates generally towards the the negative or the scary or the all the bad angles. But then there was nobody really going in there to validate those feelings or to address those feelings. So we almost inadvertently in our fields, we condition our men and women to just process it, suppress it, and deal with it on your own. And then you fast forward, a year later, we're now at that downtown protest on July 7th. And, this gunman that opened up fire on our officers with their backs turned, we had actually not to get into the details of it, but he showed up in a little SUV, and we actually allowed him to get right in between and station in a position to shoot all of our officers in the back. And probably, you know, that was in part because we were so in such a passive mode trying to welcome this protest against us, because of all of the confliction between the movement and law enforcement. We erred towards favorability to everyone just to not look like we were, I don't know, aggressive, I guess.
Yeah.
And so we allowed this suspect to get in there and get in position to sit there, get his mind right, exit his vehicle, open up the back of his SUV, pull out a SKS assault rifle, and open up fire on our officers, killing 5 and shooting 9 in a matter of 14 minutes. And, I think about that horrible night, and, it almost, so much of it is kind of a blur. The things that stand out probably the most is that, the overwhelming support that came to our PD after that from really around the world. I mean, we had police departments that were doing our follow-up investigations, answering our calls, just really every single type of support service you could have, from counseling, therapy, millions of dollars donated for mental health support. We had equine therapy, emotional support dogs, you name it, we were there. But the reality was that we spent about 3 weeks burying 5 murdered police officers. And we were in a daze. We were just going through this, you're just on this motion of emotion overload. And by the time those 3 weeks had passed, all of those agencies, they had to go back to their respective departments. And then the support, there may be dollars available, but the support, everything, things subside. People go back to their normal lives. And then you're just left with this feeling of, where is all that support? And you're almost worse than you were before, because now where you had all this support there, now you just feel even lower. And we did, in the Dallas Police Department, we did the one thing we knew to do post July 7th, 2016 ambush, and that's just put your nose down and go back to work. And we didn't, so many of the officers I spoke to about the services that were available, nobody used them. Nobody utilized them. We had been conditioned to just grit it out, just put your nose down and work, mission first. Every people on either side of you were just doing work. And so we just did work. And then I was a lieutenant. I was an evening shift patrol lieutenant at the time. And I will tell you that, what the term of it was, when you're a supervisor and you have some sort of, remorse that you don't know what to do for your people. And they're hurting. I had several of my officers exchange gunfire with the bad guy, and unfortunately, none of my officers were, had been struck that night. But they were so intricate. They played such a deep role that I knew they were hurting, and I didn't even know what to do for them. I knew they didn't want to talk about it. I wasn't going to force them to, but I wanted them to know I was there. But you start to feel like, because I don't know what to do, the best thing I can do is just go to work. And just work. And so everyone just went back to work. And so I think that is replicated around our country with our men and women. When we have these emotional overload situations, we really don't know what to do. And when we don't know what to do, we default to what we do know, which is mission. And I think unintentionally and inadvertently, we condition our men and women to just pack it down and suppress it. And that's what we have to change.
We experience the same thing in the military, and this is what happens. You talked about that, Neil, about the transition from seasons of service to the season post-service, right? So things that we internalize as far as trauma or experiences that are pretty severe to us, if we internalize it, we end up isolating ourselves. And then once your season of service is done, guess what? The mission continues. Everybody's focused on the mission and the purpose. And if you're not a part of the mission anymore, it's kind of lonely and quiet for you. No one's checking up on you anymore. But you already took all that baggage post-service into the next season of your life. But now you've internalized it, you isolate it, you never healed from it. That's when people are asking, hey, you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Anything wrong? No, that's good. I'm good. Nothing's wrong. But it's all in there. You take that luggage out, but now there's no support. There's no follow through. No one's showing up because everybody's focused on the mission. It becomes a very lonely and sad place. Now, if you experience a divorce or no one loves you or you're drinking, that's why we had 21, 22 suicides a day in the military.
Right.
That's how we got to that level, because everybody cares about you when you're on the mission. After the mission, the machine keeps rolling along. Have a good life. Take care. And that's why I think this is also, the culture has a change of, you've served your nation. You gave in the best years of your life, in the hardest of occupations, in the protection of others. We have to walk alongside you for life. This is a mission for life. The culture has a change for life. We have to show up and keep episodically checking on the wounds that you incurred over the duration of your service, because it's that severe. And I think that is the proper thing to do for those that serve. You know, we have the Veterans Administration, but it's a machine too. They can only care so much. The workload is too large, you know, and you start becoming a foreigner even in your own country, even though you served. And that's a tough place to be.
Yeah.
To feel like you don't belong anymore. You gave so much to all those around you, but you lost yourself and you don't belong anymore. That's a bad place to be.
It is, which is why you're right, man. We got to make sure we continue that even after service.
That's right.
Make sure we're checking on each other the right way. I mean, you really got to care. And that's why I think it's so important that, I mean, checkpoints should be worldwide as far as I'm concerned. And that's what I'm so proud that, you know, with the American Warrior Association and R3, which is more specifically towards first responder agencies, and R3 stands for Respond, Restore, Resolve, dealing with moral injury. We're actually going to be working together. We're going to be the resources that American Warrior Association provides and the mechanisms that R3 puts in place in these agencies is like nothing else I've ever seen as far as the positive impact it has. But you describe checkpoints as kind of the ground tiller, because if you're throwing these seeds, these resources on hard, stony ground, nothing will grow. But if you have that ground tiller first with checkpoints, it increases the receptivity of our heroes towards the resources. That's when you can be most impactful, which is why I think things were working in Fort Worth, because we had both checkpoints and R3 and the Warriors Refuge. The fact that we're going to be able to do this together, man, is an honor for me, not just because I believe in the work, but you're a good friend of mine, and I'm happy to see that. How important do you think it is, going back to what Will said about making sure we're doing this? I know you're having people from the military reach out that are interested. You're having people in the medical profession that are reaching out. Yeah. You're finding this to be something that could be beneficial in their professions as well. How important is to get this program, get checkpoints, get the resources set up across agencies across the country? And how do we do it?
Yeah, I think, you know, I believe, for a number of different reasons, some that are biblical, that this is the missing piece of the equation. This is the missing piece of the wellness puzzle. We can't rely on someone else. I mentioned earlier, you know, someone else coming to our rescue here, but we have to recognize that one of the most powerful things that exists within our ranks, whether it's in hospitals and in military outfits or in the first responder profession, one of the most powerful things we have is influence. And we've got to go out first into those units, those divisions, those bases, and we brief all the leadership on the strategy, because every single layer of leadership serves as a gatekeeper to culture change occurring, for one. So we have to give everyone the opportunity to understand the checkpoint strategy, how it works, and what we're trying to accomplish. What we're looking for is culture change here. Right, we're still going to be warriors. We're still going to show up and be guardians. We're still going to be the elite of the elite. But we are going to do it. We're going to ground till the organization to infuse just a few extra considerations, the emotional piece of what we carry, the support services that are available. We're going to validate those support services. We're going to philosophically shift from you need support because something's wrong towards you need support to be able to maintain the eliteness that you came here with, right, the servant-heartedness that you came here with. And so the leadership has to understand the strategy, first of all, and we want to give them the opportunity to vet it. Then we go to the frontline supervisors and we tell them, in order to get their buy-in, we ask them, who are your heavy hitters? Who are the people of influence within your ranks? We let them let us know. And we don't want the top of the food chain, the top of the command telling us who they are. We want the frontline people telling us the supervisors telling us who they are. And when we find them, we meet with them, we train them, we rally them towards this cause and ask them if they'll take on this initiative. And every time they're willing to do this, because again, they are servant hearted. They know what they're carrying, and they know what their influence could carry, and that we could through this motion, we have the opportunity to leave this noble hearted, servant hearted profession just as good, if not better. We have a chance to leave here with our families intact, with our health intact. And the statistics are very glaring. Our servicemen and women know what their statistics are. They've seen those numbers, 22 a day. Our men and women in law enforcement know the statistics, 3 times more likely to take our own life than someone else. And so once we get them in position to, and interested in doing this, we start this motion. And now the motion is very clear that the resources we have available have improved exponentially. They're better. And they're out there available to our men and women, not because they can't do this job again. They're there in the event they need it. So let's warm up to this idea of the resources are here to benefit us. We'll vouch for those services. We'll vet those services for them. We're going to do all the legwork for our men and women, so they don't have to. Because when you're in a crisis, that's the worst time to go looking for resources. So we're going to do the legwork for them. If they need to know information about it, we'll share it with them. We'll tell them what we know. And anyway, so yeah, through this motion daily, what we start to create, it starts with appreciation. It turns to receptiveness, and then it turns to inquiry about some of these services, because if this person of influence is willing to use those services or willing to vouch for them, then I might too. And then we allow that power of influence to start to take motion within our ranks. And I again, I started off by saying it's the missing piece of the puzzle. It's a part that has never been addressed before. The cumulative effect of that emotional trauma, the cumulative effect of the moral injury. And I think that because we've never tried it before, when we implemented into these first handful of agencies, we just saw an overwhelming receptiveness to it. They started running for it. So I think our men and women have been needing it. They've been asking for something like this. They've been wanting it, but they want to be able to have the difficulty and the struggle with dignity. They don't want it to be reflective of some sort of weakness. And again, as I know that it's a long-winded way of saying it, this is the piece that hasn't been tried before. And because of the receptiveness we're seeing, we know we're onto something really big here. But it starts with influence. We've got to get the influencers within our ranks to sit down with us and let us explain the program to them, so they can start running with it.
Yeah, and it's their program.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it work.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask, we'll do a quick break right here. What else do we want to cover, guys? Because I'm telling you, this has flowed really great. I don't know if we're at a point to wrap up, or is there something else we all want to talk about?
I like just talking. I like listening to the stories and talking.
Great, man.
It has been good. I think we've got some really informative. I think we've covered the checkpoint strategy really well. I wonder sometimes if people understand it, but I think that last one, they're just saying you brief the leadership so they understand. I think that gives I
wanted to say something there about normalizing best practices in wellness is a part of our role, and I was going to correlate that to marriage counseling. They always say marriage counseling comes 2 years too late. Why can't it just be consistent and a part of the norm of our just operational practices, whether it's monthly, quarterly, whatever, but there's just consistency there across the board. Not only when there's like you're circling the drain. It's the worst time to try to intervene, because it's already a lot of bad shit has happened. A lot of time has already elapsed, right? But if there's consistency, it's like getting like the professional football players or professional athletes, like they'll get, post rehabilitation or massages and stuff. We don't go seek help until we strain or pull the muscle.
Yeah.
We don't do any of the healing to try to keep things good consistently. So there's something there about that, like making the cultural change where it's just a norm. This is what we do. We take care of each other. We show up for each other. This is what we do. Iron sharpens iron. It's okay.
Absolutely.
Instead of the stigma of like, that's weakness. You said this word, that's weakness. You should have changed your armor. Then all your friends start talking shit about you and they try to haze you later, whoa.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there's been a couple, I'll tell you something. I do the KISS, the keep it simple, stupid methodology. But a couple of good people, like we've been in some pretty shitty situations, and a couple of the good things I heard was like, well, that was pretty shitty, and that starts it.
Yeah.
Or that could have been really messed up. And that's cracks the door open for like, oh yeah, that could have went sideways, or that did go sideways. And people start kind of open up. So just on a personal level, hearing some like leaders break the ice that way of like, holy shit, that was, or this is gonna hurt, or that sucked, or that just sucked.
Yeah.
Then everybody starts talking about it and being more open. But it takes that one person, like that guy, one guy who said, "Why do you care now, Chief? Why do you care now?" Then one person breaks the ice, and now everybody starts, that was.
Absolutely.
So you just reminded me of something that we should talk about. Let's talk about, somebody asked the question of, okay, maybe like for example, what makes checkpoints different? I think it's, or the, what do you say to people who say, if you need help, come forward? And because I don't know what y'all's thoughts are, but I kind of don't think that's what we should be saying. And here's why. Because I think we've got enough history to prove we're not going to come forward, right? So let's quit asking people to come forward when they're struggling. Let's start checking on them. We know first of all, we know the types of things that are going to impact them. The screaming mothers, we talked about the suicide, the lifeless bodies, they are going to take their toll. So instead of just relying on them to come forward, let's remove that from the equation. Yeah, they should, and there may be a responsibility at some point, but why is that why are we exclusively left to come forward? Why can't we put a mechanism in place where we're constantly checking on them?
We want to be proactive, not reactive, right? Because we already know what's going to hurt. Like we know this is going to suck. Like all the leaders, everybody's walked this life and done the work. No, that's going to suck and it's going to hurt. We got to be proactive, not reactive, especially when so much time has gone by or so much pain and suffering. And then add those other variables of like if they're having bad relationship or divorce, alcoholism, some other things. Yeah, we know it's going to be very bad at that point. So why not make it just a normal practice that we check on our people, that we take care of our people, that when they come to the scene and this X, Y, and Z happens, we have to be on top of it. We got to take care of people. We got to show up. Yeah. But you want it like natural, right? We don't want to force someone like, hey, take care of your people. We want to culturally, we take care of our people. And that means we know our people, we know the names of their children. So when you go, hey, Mark, how's Lindsay and Suzanne? That's a leader that cares when he asks and remembers the name of your children. That person will know like, he cares about me. And that's what you want culturally. You want that normalized within the ranks, that we take care of each other. We show up for each other. We just don't show up to the funeral in our best dress blues when the worst case scenario happens. We show up for each other all the time, and it's consistent. It's normal. This is not just the best business practices, but this is what we do for those that serve each other in our nation.
Yeah, I love that. We talked earlier about truth, right? And a truth is that whether you're a serviceman or a man or woman or a police officer, life happens, right? And there's things that happen in life that are just difficult. Sometimes our marriages fall apart. Sometimes our family members, we're at that age where, our moms and dads are getting older, and those things are stressors. Like life is difficult, and I think what we need to do is just recognize truth. The reason the checkpoint strategy works so well is not because we're checking on men and women who go to loss of life scenes alone. It's because we're checking on everyone who's there, whether you had a role in that loss of life scene or not, because we know that life happens, and we know that our men and women are not always going to come forward. I love that we say, if you need help, ask for it. But the reality is we've got a lot of empirical data in our profession that says we're not going to come forward. We're going to white knuckle this thing. We're going to grit it down till the wheels fall off. And we don't want the wheels to fall off. So through this motion of checking constantly, not only on the person who's maybe have gone to, an impactful scene, but even the person who's just been deployed for a while, right? Even the person who has I don't know, who was just, I don't know, maybe anything. You may have been the person that responded to a fatality car crash, and all you did was lay flares. But by checking on that officer during that scene, what you are doing is you are creating a reminder for something that they may have been carrying from a previous scene, and planting the seed for something they might carry in a future scene. That's why this motion is so incredibly important. When you put this strategy in place, what you find is that you learn all kinds of things. You learn officers say, hey, listen, I appreciate the call. I'm fine. Just got some stuff I'm dealing with at home. I've got some stuff with my parents, aging parents, or my son, or alcohol. Like it's a number of different things that they would not share with administrators, but they'll share with the right checkpoint officers.
Yeah.
That's why there's nothing more critical than selecting the right people to start this motion of checking, and then you give it to them. You clear the lane and you let them go add additional checkpoint officers because it's their program. We're just clearing the lanes for them. And what winds up happening is that those servicemen and women or the officers that they're checking on will share things with them that we wouldn't have ever known before. That's the gold in this program. All of it is about getting our men and women to normalize the discussion, to get them to the support resources. Has nothing to do with taking credit or any department initiative. We build this thing where they're embedded checkpoints throughout their career, throughout their deployments. They're constantly going to be checking on, because it may have been a previous incident, it may be a future incident, but the number one thing that matters is getting them to the support so that they can be those men and women they set out to be when they took on our profession.
There's another thing I was just thinking about, because we started our family readiness groups, right? So you got the operator, the man or woman who's doing the job, right? But then they got their significant other at home, their wife, their husband, whatever not. And they don't get the love. Like I've always said before, like I was probably horrible. I don't even know why anybody would want to marry me. But, we get whatever accolades, we get recognition, we'll get awards and things like that. Some of it matters to some people, some folks, it doesn't really matter. But those that live with us, that, love us, they kind of suffer in silence, and they don't get any pats on the back. But where's their counseling? Where's the family readiness group where the old seasoned head is like, hey, just so you know, your husband was involved in a pretty serious incident. These are the effects. Where is that consistent help and support and counseling for the other half, the better half, who's going to have to deal with this when her husband's on the couch, won't talk, drinking a six-pack by himself, trying to veg out on a football game because he's trying to get his mind off of something else, but he hears the voices of the mom crying, or he sees the contorted bodies, but he's watching a football game, but he doesn't see the play.
Yeah.
How does she or he deal with that? And that's what starts, I think, the pain at home, where she or he didn't sign up to do that and sacrifice and serve in that nature, but they're getting bled on. They're dealing with the fallout. And if you don't change together in a marriage, you change apart, which ends up in a divorce. So I think the other half with that, with checkpoints, is how do we take care of the other part of the team who's suffering in silence, who doesn't know how to deal with it, doesn't see the images that they're seeing, doesn't hear the screams and crying. I mean, even for me, if I close my eyes right now, I can relive every single mission I've been on where it was traumatic. And there's nothing like hearing the screams of a woman whose soul is being ripped from her body because someone she loves has been taken from them. And you can't leave the scene because you're searching the compound, the house, the target building. We have to finish the job. So you can't even remove yourself from the trauma that you're hearing. That's tough. But that's the other part to it. Like, we got to, as a team, move everybody forward, help everybody. And then the kids, the other thing we don't talk about is, like, in the military, children's suicide 4 times higher than children's suicide in the rest of the nation. I'm sure the wear and strain and stress on the children of police officers and other first responders, also nurses. I mean, if you're a single mom who's working as a nurse in the ER and you got children, think about that stress. Think about that strain. Think about that loss to ER doctor who can't save a patient. I mean, there's a lot of need out there. There's a lot of help, a lot more good we can do. And I think checkpoints is going to be a significant part of that for the entire nation.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you guys though. I mean, do you think I've got this theory that I'm trying to work on about why checkpoints, like what are all, why is this so important that we get this out there to around the country? I believe that there's medicine in service. Like, I believe this, especially in this emotional health space. And when we go out and we check on somebody, all because we want to hopefully prevent them from going through something difficult, kind of like Lee did. I mean, do you think there's medicine in it? Like, do you think that this is a way for you to heal?
Yeah, that's why I started American Warrior Association. So I did 8 combat deployments myself. And the way, I'm going to live with what I got no matter what, because they're just experiences that you can't take away. But that's unselfish service to your country. Like, you got to take the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's nothing good about war and conflict. Like, you see the worst parts of humanity, and you see what another human can do to another human, and it's deplorable. And it's crime after crime being committed against each other. It doesn't matter if you're in the right or wrong. At the end of the day, it's about winning. And so there's going to be a lot of human suffering in between. And so you live with those experiences. And then I put in the right place, because in making sense of it all is trying to do good for others, make it better for others, give our kids a better life. Maybe we can have more safety and freedom and security. Maybe we can get out of these endless wars for nothing. Maybe that'll be better. Maybe we could save a soul here. Maybe we could save a life here. Maybe we could save a marriage here. Maybe in saving this family and keeping this family together will make up for this loss that I've seen. And I think we're all about that. We're all in our, why does what we do matter? How do you make it make sense? And you make it make sense by outweighing the bad with much more good, times 10, maybe times 100. And geometrically progressing goodness throughout society to overwhelm and overcome the bad. Because like I've heard many times, the only thing that needs to happen for evil to prosper is for good men to do nothing. So why do the men and women step up to do the noble work, despite the sacrifices, despite the suffering, despite the tragedy, despite all? I mean, who's going to sit down and watch 20 horror flicks in a row? No one wants to do it. No, that's not entertainment. That's not joyful. That's not contentment. That's not happiness. But in our life, if we sat down for a moment after 30 years of service, I only did 24. I'm not in the 30-year mark. But there's a lot of horrific scenes that I could stack up, and it'll be one after the other of a horror film. And I don't want that for anybody else. I don't want anybody to live that. I want everybody to have that joy and contentment and the freedom and liberty that we provide as a nation. And that's the cross we each bear on our shoulder. But let's do better for others. Why did Christ sacrifice for all of us who maybe aren't worthy of the grace?
Amen.
Yeah, because we couldn't carry it all ourselves.
Carry ourselves. So maybe in a way we carry a little bit so others do not have to. Why do we fight and sometimes die? So that others might live. And that is the nobility of what we do and what men and women are doing every day at home and abroad. And that's what we're searching for. We're the good guys. Yeah. Americans are the good guys. And that's why we do what we do. So in this, just like what Lee did, in walking in the steps, he was like, I don't want this for you. I don't want him or her or he, or anybody to live with this pain, this suffering. I don't want you to bear the cross I had to bear. Let's heal from these wounds. Let's make it better. How do we make it better? Checkpoints. Let's do this. And that's why you're doing what you're doing. That's why you're doing what you're doing. That's why we're trying to do what we do, because we know it is needed. Did it take 22 military suicides a day for us to wake up and realize there's a call for action? Did we have to see the numbers, the statistics of more police officers dying from suicide than in line of duty in 1 year for us to wake up and realize we have to change? We have to make a difference. Like, what does it take? No, we're beyond that. We know we need action. We know we need change. We know we have to care for each other. That's what brothers and sisters do. What man or a good woman sees another person drowning and does not try to save them? Of course we're going to. And so in this society, in this modern world we live in, we're going to do what we can. And that's what we're doing. We're doing all we can with what we have come to know, what we walked in, what we've seen, and what we've sacrificed for, so that our sacrifices were for naught, and that they were for something, and it's for something better. In a nutshell, that's what I think.
Absolutely, bro. I agree 100%. And you're right. I think sometimes, well, it's like every parent wants a better life for their children than they may have had. Even though, I had a great life, I want my kids to have even better. I think every true patriot in our country wants the next generation of Americans to have a better place. You don't want people to have to go and fight the way you fought for our country, see the things that you saw, and still living with today, still have those scars. You want to leave something better for somebody else, and that's coming through service to others. And that's medicine. There's no question there's medicine. I mean, there's research on that. And they say if you feel hopeless, one of the best things you can do for yourself is to help someone else. Because if you're able to do something positive for somebody else, able to improve somebody else's life, maybe their condition just a little bit, not only you're helping them, you'll find most of the time it's helping you even more. And that's what I've seen with checkpoints and what we've been able to do with AWA and with R3. You talk about wellness in motion. A lot of people talk about wellness. There's tons of talk about it out there right now. And I'm glad there is. Raise the awareness. That's great. But what I've seen you do is walk the walk, brother. You got out there and did something about it. You actually put something in place. You worked with your officers with no ego whatsoever, completely humble, to go in there and even tell them, okay, this is yours. Let's make this work. That's what you had to. You didn't come in for credit. You didn't come in to try to get praise for Reuben. You just wanted to put something in place that was going to make a difference.
So you want to hear what my call for action was? One of my respected pastor friends of mine said during a coffee meeting one time, he said, Will, I hope to just kind of skid into heaven. I was like, oh shit, if you're going to skid into heaven and you're a pastor, I better get to work.
Yeah.
And I know it's not through works, but I was like, holy shit, man. I get to the work of doing some good in this world is like yesterday. I better get on it if you're going to skid in, because I'm going to have a problem. So anyhow, that was my...
Yeah. It is interesting. Like you get to this point where I feel like, I think all three of us share this, you look back on the things that you've been part of or experienced or seen, and you look at a lot of our brothers and sisters who either didn't make it out or they're not in good shape now. And you can't help but have a sense of humility and gratitude for just the fact that we are able to have served, and be here today talking about not only our service, but the strategies and support systems to be able to help our men and women. That's an incredible place to be, because there are a lot of us right now who are got demons in their head that are getting the best of them. And I'm not saying we don't have demons in our head. We all do. It's an everyday battle to make sure that we're winning, at that, to keep ourselves in the right places. But the fact that we are winning enough daily to be able to keep the passion and desire to help our brothers and sisters it's a very humbling thing. I'm glad we're here. And I think that humility and gratitude are two really powerful positions to embrace, because it's only when you have humility and gratitude that you can start seeing what God has ordered us to do, which is we have to focus on things that are true, that are righteous, and that are honorable. And it's hard to focus on things that are true and righteous and honorable when you're losing the battle or when you're consumed really when you're in the trenches. So that's where this is the call to action. This is what we're doing, and we're going to use our influence. We're going to use our spheres of network and our colleagues and the other people that we can that believe in what we're trying to do, and we're going to call them to this cause too, because it is going to take all of us. It's going to take a collaborative effort. We're lucky. We're lucky to have AWA. We're lucky to have R3. We're lucky to have checkpoints, but this is just the start. We've got to call in our brothers and sisters and every bit of, really every bit of influence that they have as well, if we're going to move the needle on this thing. Because this thing is, it's big what our men and women are up against. The things that they're carrying, they are things that compromise and aim to take everything they love the most, from their health to their families and even their lives. And we're not going to move the needle by talking about it. We're going to have to put wellness in motion, put our best foot forward, and get those other influencers alongside of us here to move this thing. And then once we move it, make it part of our infrastructure, put it in place where it doesn't go away. I think we're in it to a degree. We're fortunate now that there is an administration in place and a narrative in place that understands supporting our men and women, our servicemen and women. That isn't always the case. So what we have to do right now, while we have that, is put those hard institutionalized structures in place so that in the event that changes, this type of support doesn't go away. I think that's really what we're up against, and we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of that. Like that. That's why I think that we've got to call in reinforcements here. We've got to make sure that we're doing anything and everything we can to move the needle on this thing.
Well, to help people do that, and to help them find out a little bit more about checkpoints, where can they go? Either to check out your book, Checkpoints, the Blueprint to Emotional Health for First Responders. As I said, I'm on my third time through this book. It is absolutely incredible. But if they want to check out the book, they just want to check out your website, maybe want to talk to you more about Checkpoints, how do they do that?
So we're on all the social medias, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can go to startcheckpoints.com. That's our website as well, startcheckpoints.com. That'll give you some information about the program. The book will give you the 7-step outline of how we implemented it, but really we want them to reach out to us. We are working collaboratively now with R3 and AWA. We've got powerhouses, and this is, we will bring in any vertical. We've already addressed this with some of our military outfits. We've addressed this in emergency rooms, or have decided to pilot this strategy. We know it applies to all of the verticals in the first responder profession, but we think there's a corporate application to this as well. Again, everyone is carrying heavy burdens. This checking on people motion it's that appreciation, acknowledgement, and sometimes it's just that little extra piece we need. So yeah, just reach out to us through those platforms, and we set up a demo with you. We'd love to be able to meet with you, all of us, and just kind of share our experiences, and we figure out how to weave this strategy into your respective field.
Man, I appreciate the work you're doing very much. Got a lot of respect for you. Love you, brother. You've always been there for me. It's a very powerful thing. I hope you understand that the way you are there for the profession, and again, not just for ours, for our military heroes, for anyone, but developing something that actually works. It's not just a program that, a chief or someone can hang their hat on and say, look what I did. It's something that's actually pushing the needle, something that's actually making a difference. And I hope you understand how much I appreciate you as a person, you as a professional, as a leader, as an author, but really it's seeing your heart for others that makes me respect you more than anything else. It means a lot to be able to just sit and talk with you about this kind of stuff.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. I do. It means a lot coming from you, and Will, obviously you, with your experience and your background, and man, it means so much to just be able to sit with you and talk these kinds of stories. I do believe this is the medicine that we need. I do believe that the truth is really right there for the taking. We talk about asking our men and women to come forward. Our profession, often we don't come forward. So let's not make that the only lifeline for our men and women. Let's reach out to them. And man, I'll tell you, like, I feel there are so many difficulties and things that we overcome in life. And when you look back, it's only for the grace of God that we did it. And we have to recognize that if it weren't for the people who have been praying for us, or God just coming in and pulling us out of some of those things, man, we wouldn't be where we're at. And that, we just got to do all we can to help our men and women understand that truth, both from the faith that we believe in. Really, and I mean, I'm kind of rambling a little bit with that closing. I apologize, but
I'll go ahead.
Yeah, man. There's it's very humbling. It's very humbling when we just to know that a lot of our brothers and sisters, many of who are better than us, didn't make it out like that, or didn't get to.
Yeah.
And we just got to do more for them, man. I just want to make sure that we do more. And this is my small way to do that. So I appreciate the opportunity, man. I really do. Both of you.
Well done.
Absolutely. I'm not saying we have to stop there, guys. It just seemed like that was kind of leading into something where we could use as a close. Again, is there anything else y'all want to talk about? I know you like to talk. Oh, and one thing, we always close out in prayer.
I love it.
And we'll give a guest an option if they want to close us out in prayer. Yeah. I didn't want to throw you under the bus right in the middle of the conversation. No. If you would like to do that, we'll make the offer. Mm-hmm. If you'd rather one of us do it, we'll do it. How do you feel?
No, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay, that's very cool. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Will?
I can always ramble on. I almost wanted to say something about, I wish society had a little more empathy and compassion for those that serve, that thought I had in my head is like, everybody gets mad at a traffic cop for pulling them over because they run a red light. Like, why are you bothering me? Why are you doing this? You're a jerk, right? But if you walked in his or her shoes and you were at a scene where a minivan got T-boned and a couple of kids died from someone who ran a red light, you'd probably see it through a different lens and have a different perspective and appreciate the fact that he's actually just trying to keep people safe and save some kids' lives. But people don't think that way because we fall into a form of materialism, selfishness that's inundated our society to make us pretty callous and cold. But I wish people had more empathy for that. That understanding.
It's funny that you say that because I know that's right in line with Reuben, because a comment you had like in a panel discussion you're in one time was that I wish more people would have a little bit more understanding about how incredibly difficult our jobs are. And it's exactly what you're saying. And you wouldn't have said that if it hadn't been for things you've seen, things you've experienced yourself. But it is hard sometimes for other people to understand what we go through. And I don't expect them to understand it from a practical sense as they've gone through it. But a little empathy, just a little bit of understanding, I think could go a long way. But maybe that's why we got to make sure we're the ones saving ourselves.
Yeah, so I think this is let's roundtable this a little bit, because that's really good. Like, I talk about truths a lot, like just understanding the truth. The only way you get to the truth is to look internally. You have to have an introspective look at what you're really carrying, what the truth is about it. And maybe sometimes, some of the short-sightedness on everything from, a police officer blocking traffic or an ICE officer's role in immigration. Like we've got to recognize that we all carry these emotional burdens, and our perspective is everything. If we just shifted our perspective to understand what that other person might be going through, that ICE officer or that patrol officer does in fact have bills, does in fact have a relationship or health issues or finance stuff, does in fact, consume an unhealthy amount of trauma, whether through their years of service or again, this applies to our military men and women, like putting ourselves in their shoes to just understand the burdens that we're all carrying. What it should do first and foremost is tell us how incredibly similar we all are. And that's a disarming technique, like to just understand that we're just trying to do the best we can with the situation we have right now. And the human experience, I think, is really, it's not very different for all of us. We all struggle with bills. We all struggle in our relationships. We all, struggle with our children or our aging parents. And those are the things that matter to us most. That's why I'm so adamant about this motion, whether it's checkpoints or it's just you calling somebody up to just say, hey man, I'm just thinking about you. I just want to check on you. You all right? I'm here if you need anything. Man, if we just did a little bit more of that, like on a daily practice, the miles we might get out of that. And I don't want to blow sunshine at you two, constantly, but you two carry an incredible amount of influence, and you have networks that are vast. Like, people in high places, but you also know people who are not. And man, to get a phone call from one of you or a text from one of you that just to say, hey, just thinking about you, bro, that's it. Do you know what it would do? It's like the Bible says, to what you would do for the least is that's so impactful, because even the thief will do something good for their own family members. Right. But that's what we're trying to create here. That's that motion, is just recognizing that whether you're the top of an organization or you're a line officer, man, we're all carrying heavy stuff. And I know that we care, because I know the human experience is similar. We do care. But if you put that care in motion and just check on somebody, especially somebody who you really won't get any benefit or return from it, man, that's epic right there. That's what we need to create. That's emotion. And I don't care if it's done through checkpoints. This is the systematic structure way to do it, but we don't have to do it that way. Like I tell people all the time, if somebody's crossed your mind, I do this in conferences where I'm presenting, I tell them, listen, somebody has crossed your mind over the last 24, 48 hours, somebody you just thought of them, maybe a colleague, a college friend, a high school friend, a family member, extended family, just send them a message. Just do it now. Pull out your phone, send them a message. Just say, just checking on you, make sure you're okay. Man, you'd be surprised the kind of distance that thing gets. That's what our world is in desperate need of right now. And that's what we're trying to create.
Well, you do, again, you walk the walk. Just a couple of days ago, you did that for me. You just called to check on me. Yeah. And it was actually the point where I needed somebody to check in on me. I didn't even realize it. Yeah. But you called and you checked on me. We had a great conversation. Just yesterday, police chief in Grand Prairie, Texas, a good friend of mine, Daniel Sesney, just called me up just to check on me. I don't know where. This guy's super busy. We caught up a little bit, conversation, maybe 2 minutes. But he called and checked on me just because he cared. Man, that meant the world to me to have somebody thinking about me, even with the busy schedule they may have, to just reach out. And man, let's challenge everybody watching. Just like Chief Ramirez just said, everybody's got somebody it's been on their mind last 24 to 48 hours. Hit pause, come back, but hit pause. Reach out to somebody right now. Let them know you're thinking about them. Let them know you care. And I guarantee you the impact it'll make if every one of us do that is immeasurable. That's a strong strategy, bro.
See, y'all are extra kind and nice. Like we got this like parochialism and tribalism going on within the special operations community. So my friends like Mikey and Dax, a couple Green Beret third group guys, the way they check on me is, "Hey, Will, you still short and ugly?" I'll get a text like that. So I get some kind of I get some negative checkpoint going on over here. I don't know if that's kind of indicative of us, razzing each other over here in special operations, but we got to have thick skin. But it's their way of like, without being too sensitive, that like, "Hey, Will, how you doing, big dog?" And I'll be like, "How you doing? How's everything going? Good?" Then we'll jab each other a little bit.
They're thinking about.
But that's what it is
Absolutely.
in our rebellious, dysfunctional way.
Yeah, it's so
and
true.
We need that.
I talk about the checkpoint strategy, which we, we're building an app for, which I think is going to be a big deal, right? Because what we're trying to do with the app is create all of those scenarios where we know people are challenged, and I use anniversaries as my, when I'm demoing this, because I tell them, if you notice, you take anniversaries for example, whether we apply it to military men and women or police officers, when the anniversary of a critical incident that you were involved in, let's say it was a deadly force confrontation, whether or a shootout, or you were injured, man, we do a good job of supporting our men and women in that event. But let the anniversary of that date come around.
Right.
And I'll tell you, the person who was involved in it, they remember that shooting, they remember that injury. But very few people do the following year. Maybe the officer who was your cover or your partner. But go 2 years removed, man, no one's there. We have this, and it's not because we don't care, it's because life happens. And the even better example of that is, take the anniversary. God forbid you've lost a family member. But if you've ever lost a parent, or a brother or sister, the anniversary, that death is so incredibly ingrained in your season, in your month, and whenever it was. And yes, everyone's there for the funeral and the support, and you're appreciative of that. But even on the anniversary, 1 year removed, even your spouse doesn't sometimes remember that anniversary. And it's not because they don't care. It's because their real life happened. But to you, on the anniversary, it's powerful. And I'll tell you this right now: if Will, for example, if I lost a family member, and I know you two would be there, to support me, but on the anniversary of it, a year or two or however many later, if I got a message from one of you that just said, "Hey, Reuben, I know this is a tough month for you. I'm just checking on you," man, I would walk through glass for you. And no one, if you support somebody on those anniversary dates of those emotional events, not only would I walk through glass for you, but I promise you this: no one for the rest of your life would ever talk bad about you around me again.
Yeah.
That's what we're creating here with this motion. We are taking emotional situations, which we know exist throughout our lives, on or off duty, and we're plugging in a person of influence within the right window, not too long after you've already suppressed it, compartmentalized it, and figured out either a poor coping strategy or some technique to handle it, and not too soon before you're really not even understanding the gravity of what's occurred. But that formula, an emotional situation plugged in by a person of influence, somebody who cares, at just the right time, we create the optimal opportunity for change. And what we're aiming for here is more support, more trust that we know exists. There's a lot of people who support us that just don't do it because real life gets in the way. We're trying to institutionalize it. We're structuring it so that support is constantly on display. And I think it's gonna. Yeah, I think it's going to help.
Like for instance, talk about empathy and compassion. Yesterday or the day before yesterday, they did that honor walk for Kimber, that young 18-year-old girl who was killed in a shooting in Alabama at just a little high school get together. And she was shot, and they weren't able to save her, but they were able to keep her alive long enough, and she donated her organs. And they do this thing called the honor walk, and literally her whole high school showed up.
Wow.
As they're rolling her bed down the hallway, so she'd go into final surgery one more time, so she can, through her organ donation, give life to others. And her last sacrifice of good deeds she did on this earth. But could you imagine this beautiful young 18-year-old girl who got killed in a random, unnecessary act of violence, and all the first responders who showed up to that scene to try to save her, and then all of her classmates, not only at the scene, but in the hospital, down the hall, lined up the hallways, up and down, the teachers and everything, as this young girl was killed in a tragic crime. That effect on them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
We'll never forget. So, but just remember it, and put it in the right place so that there's healing and post-traumatic growth and not this depression and sadness, because at the end of her last act was to give life to others.
Yeah.
And let's remember that, right? But that just happened too. But how many of these events and things happen across the nation of a population of 330 plus million people every day, every city, every state, and that those that have decided to serve others are dealing with every day. And that's the empathy and compassion we need everybody to have for each other. Let's love each other as God has loved us and show that love.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's good.
Stuff, brother.
Yeah, it really is, man. But this is the real stuff, man. This is the real stuff that people carry. This is, you talked about, I think we maybe even before the show, Will talked about the average person is consuming these tragic events, these life-changing events, maybe one or two throughout their life where they lose a loved one. Or then you have those that are in vicinity of some tragedy, like the tragedy with this little 18-year-old, with this young girl and losing her life. But then you get your first responders who are consuming this regularly on top of that. This is what we want people to understand, is that we may not have our best foot forward on a traffic stop, or we may not have had our best bedside manner in an emergency room, but there's things that we're carrying that are contributing to that. And sometimes just a little bit of consideration for whatever anyone else is carrying. And it's not just, it doesn't just go our direction. It goes to the public's as well, when they don't have their best foot forward. But just a little bit of a consideration to the things that we know everyone's carrying, it goes a long way. And that's just, when we were kids, we always wore those bracelets that said, what WWJD, right? Like, and that's a powerful reminder is if you can put that as a filter on what you do, just consider, how could I handle this just a little bit more like God would want me to, like Jesus would do it. I mean, I think we would be the ones who benefit from that the most. We would be the ones who had just a little bit of an improvement on our quality of life. And you couple that with a strategy like this, or strategy with sharing and acknowledging and trying to help people where you can, maybe then we move the needle on this thing we call life, right? This is, and see an increase in our quality of life.
Well done. Would you like to close in prayer?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Absolutely, man.
I would. All right. Dear Lord, we just thank you for this opportunity. Lord, we know that coming together to be able to talk about the strategies and programs and ways to improve our marriages, improve our quality of life, improve and heal from some of the difficulties and struggles in this life that we're in. It doesn't happen at the level that it should without warriors, without guardians, without men and women who are willing to share their struggles and their difficulty with that servant heart that you gave us to be able to protect and serve, not only physically and in our physical lives, but in our emotional and our mental lives. We thank you, Lord, for giving us that spirit. Thank you for the men and women here who are sharing these stories, and especially for those men and women who are listening to these stories. We thank you mostly, Lord, for the opportunity to include our faith and our love for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ through our mission, not only through our careers, but in our post careers. And Lord, we just pray that we would always be able to do this tall, difficult mission with ease, because we know that you are guiding us. We thank you for protecting our families. We thank you for our brothers and sisters who serve and all those who have served before us. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.